Good evening, everyone. Welcome to full council. This evening is the budget. Someone strategically placed the gavel in front of me. I hope that's not indicative that I might be using it this evening, so I will put it to one side. Please can I just remind people about showing respect to when other members are speaking, and also just be careful on mobiles and iPads and laptops, please. I'm now just going to hand over to the Chief Executive.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like just to remind members on the restrictions applying to voting under Section 106 of the Local Government Finance Act 1992, which are set out in the Budget Report. Members are reminded of the provisions of Section 106 Local Government Finance Act in relation to Agenda Item 5. This means that if you are present today and an amount of council tax is payable by you and has remained unpaid for at least 2 months, you should at the meeting and as soon as practicable after its commencement disclose the fact that Section 106 applies to you and shall not vote on any question concerning Agenda Item 5. If it applies to you, you may speak on the item but not vote.
Thank you. Item number 2, apologies. Are there any apologies for absence this evening? Councillor Sokill, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just one apology from Councillor Edgar Holroyd. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Patrick, please.
Oh, thank you, Madam Mayor. One apology, Councillor Smage. Thank you.
Thank you. No more apologies. Oh, Councillor Burke, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Kath Pinnock, who is elsewhere trying to prevent no-deal Brexit, apparently.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Item number 3. I move that the minutes of the meeting of Council held on the 16th of January 2019 be approved as a correct record. Is that seconded?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Please vote by show of hands. Thank you. That is carried. Item number 4. A list of granted dispensations has been tabled. Members who have any other interests should disclose their interests now. Are there any interests to declare? Can I remind any members who have declared an interest to complete the form and submit to the clerk by the end of the meeting?
Chair, can I just add a further dispensation, please, to the list that's been tabled? So a further dispensation has been granted to Councillor Donald Firth in relation to a company. Okay, a further dispensation has been granted and should be added to the list which has been tabled. So a dispensation has been granted to Councillor Donald Firth in relation to a council company on which he's a nominee and in which there's a contractual interest with the council. Okay.
Thank you. Item 5, Budget 2019-2022. Can I remind members that the mover of an amendment will have the same length of time to speak to their amendment as that taken by the mover of the Cabinet motion, or for a maximum of 10 minutes, whichever is longer. There are 2 amendments to this motion have been received. All of the speakers, be they group leaders or not, will have a maximum of 5 minutes in accordance with Council Procedure Rules. In accordance with Council Procedure Rule 19.7, any decisions taken in relation to the budget, including amendments, shall be done by recorded vote. After consultation with group leaders, I have agreed to apply Council Procedure Rule 18.12 regarding the process for the consideration of the motion and amendments. A copy of a flow chart setting out this process has been placed on your tables. I will now invite Councillor Pandor to present the motion of Cabinet. Councillor Pandor, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, I'm proud to present our Labour budget, my first budget as leader of the Council. We've protected the most vulnerable in our society, we've invested in people, and we want to rejuvenate and regenerate our infrastructure. Madam Mayor, this is a change of course for the citizens of Kirklees. The budget brings message of hope, and you'll see what I mean by that as I actually progress into my speech. We're taking practical steps to improve the lives of the many, but this is only possible because we've actually built on our foundations over the last 10 years. I was going to say that we've delivered savings, but in reality we've actually delivered cuts, real cuts to our communities. We've protected our reserves, and we are now planning to build the reserves so we become more sustainable as we move forward. And quite frankly, we've lived within our means, and hopefully this budget will actually now bring more hope to the future. But I want to be clear in this chamber. We've had to live within our means, which has been difficult for not just councillors and staff, but to our citizens in Kirklees. There's been sustained systemic cuts year on year from the Tory government over the last 10 years. Basically, we've lost 60 pence in every pound from national government. Councils like Kirklees, where we have high levels of deprivation, have actually been propping up authorities which have not got the same level of need. Don't take my word for it. The LGA leader, Lord Porter, who's a Conservative peer, quotes, "The money local government has to provide vital services is running out fast, and huge uncertainty remains about how councils will pay for services into the next decade and beyond. If the government fails adequately to fund local government, then it will be our local communities and our local economies who will suffer the consequences. It will be those who rely on vital adult social care to live independent lives. It will be those who use the buses that we rely on, and it will be those who actually rely on council tax benefits who will take the massive burdens on what we are seeing. The spending review will make or break vital services for local people." Now, this is something that the LGA leader has said, and he says it how he sees it. So the future is looking bleak, but hopefully what I will do, Madam Mayor, is try and bring some hope, like I said, into our budget. There's been a situation where austerity has been a political choice. It's not been something that we've been led to believe that it's a necessity. Thousands of people in Kirklees and nationally have suffered. I want to challenge that. My administration wants to challenge that, and I hope the council will challenge that head on as well. We've listened, we've worked hard with our communities, and we are understanding what their priorities are. Austerity, Madam Mayor, is a devastating, has had a devastating effect on public services. We've protected the most vulnerable, which includes children at risk, disabled adults, older people who require our support. Many families who are just about managing, who actually rely on benefits, despite the fact that they're working flat out, day in, day out. And that's why, as a cabinet, as a leader, we work really hard on this budget. I want to change the narrative of disrepair. I don't want to make any false promises, but what I do want to do is start to put the building blocks back in to actually kickstart our local area. The small steps we take today will deliver the hope that we need to actually put into our communities. That's not to hide the fact that we are one of the lowest funded authorities in the country. In fact, we're the second lowest of all the 36 metropolitan authorities in the country. We've had to make cuts of £199 million over the last 9 years. That is quite a massive blow to our budget. We've also a forecast gap of funding up to £46 million over the next 2 years. Our existing plan from 18 to 2020 has a funding shortfall. This year alone, we've had to make £16.2 million worth of cuts. Next year, we're having to make another £13.2 million worth of cuts. The cuts cannot and will not fall on the most vulnerable. That is something that we cannot afford to do. Our corporate plan recognises the scale of the financial challenges. Tough decisions have been made and they will continue to be made. The plan's vision is very, very clear, and I quote, "A district which combines a strong, sustainable economy with a great quality of life, leading to thriving communities, growing business, high prosperity and low inequality, and where people enjoy better health throughout their lives." And we want to make sure that we actually build on that. And to do this, we need to support this budget, which will actually develop a different type of organisation. Our organisation needs to restructure. We need to develop new innovative ways of doing things differently. We need to change the way we work with our communities. We need to keep the vulnerable safe, but at the same time, we need to make sure that they actually have control of their own lives. We need to focus on the council work that we do ourselves, because there are certain things that we do as a council which we cannot outsource and which we should not outsource. However, Madam Mayor, this is a one-year budget, but it's no less ambitious in its plans. It's ambitious for growth. It's ambitious in terms of building our council tax base and our business base. And let me explain why it's a one-year budget. We live in uncertain times. And no, I'm not going to talk about Brexit, although it's chaos around what might be the outcome. But it would be foolish for me to stand here and say that we will have a budget for 2 or even 3 years. The reason why is because nationally we don't know what the situation is. The scenario financially, we don't know what's going to happen. And there is a national spending review that is still ongoing, and we are fighting very hard to make sure places like Kirklees actually gets its fair share. Also, we have a government and a Prime Minister who are in office, but some would argue they're not in power. We've strengthened our financial position, but at the same time, it's been, in my view, at the expense of our borough and our residents, because they are the ones who have actually had to bear the brunt of the cuts. The budget includes a 2.99% increase in council tax. This excludes fire, police and the precept to parish councils. This will generate an extra £5.2 million for this borough and for its residents. An investment that will protect the most vulnerable. It will create the best services for older people. It will invest in dementia, and it will invest in disabled people who are coping with quite a lot of difficulty. The investment will total £1.9 million to support mental health and health provision. Additional £400,000 for domestic abuse. We will invest in our children, in our young people. Put money into high needs, children's improvements and youth provision and play areas. And I'm pleased to announce, Madam Mayor, that this will bring in the budget, £6 million of revenue on extra £45 million in capital. This is additional to the capital that we approved last year. I mentioned, Madam Mayor, earlier on that we want to regenerate our infrastructure. Decades of austerity has resulted in our infrastructure being dilapidated. and it needs urgent attention. That's why, Madam Mayor, I'm pleased to announce that we're going to actually have a programme of putting money back into our roads. It will regenerate places where people live and work. It's not just about our towns like Dewsbury and Huddersfield. It's also about the smaller towns and villages that we care so dearly about. And that's why I'm announcing today that we're going to have a total investment of £210 million across the council. Madam Mayor, these are challenging times. Local government has been through massive upheaval. Our staff have worked really, really hard. All you in this chamber have worked very, very hard. But this is nothing compared to the hurdles and the hardship our residents have faced over the last 10 years. This budget means a lot to our local residents. It breathes new life into our communities. A new ambition for Kirklees. It puts people, place and our partners at the heart of everything that we do. Because I cannot do everything through the council chamber, neither can you, neither can my cabinet. But we need to show our citizens what we can do when we get together. Through our deeds and our actions, we will deliver. Labour majority administration in Kirklees will begin a period of renewal. Madam Mayor, I commend this budget to the council and to the good people of Kirklees. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pandor. Is that seconded?
Madam Mayor, yes, second it and reserve the right.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. There is an amendment from the Green Group, and Councillor Cooper will move the amendment. Councillor Cooper, please.
It's at moments like this that I genuinely miss Andrew Palfreman. He's had his good-natured bash at the Green Budget Amendment with no hint of malice. He would always end by naming us. My favourite was when he referred to us as Compo, Clegg and Foggy, which I pointed out were three old guys from Holfirth who had some bizarre ideas. I suggest that perhaps he looked closer to home for these characters. But I guess there's going to be nothing from the Tories today. No Tory budget amendment, so they must be happy with Labour's budget. No ideas, not even bizarre ones, so I guess it will be a dignified silence from them now. Perhaps not. We have reiterated our call for support for rough sleepers in our town centres, to restore play areas removed for health and safety reasons, and greater support for safety schemes on our roads. We propose taking action to address the lack of support for new tenants on low incomes, getting set up in new homes, and provision of outdoor gym equipment in our town centres to encourage greater exercise and a new element as part of our town centre regeneration. We, of course, recognise the increasingly embarrassing record of Kirklees on recycling and have suggested some ways to address this. We've been inspired by the Council's declaration of a climate emergency and want to get Kirklees off to a flying start in efforts to reduce carbon emissions and play our small part, not just saving the world, but creating a better world for us here in Kirklees. We've sought a realisable but ambitious tree planting programme, the Kirklees Forest Project, where every school child will get the opportunity to plant at least one tree during their education. This is not just a fluffy feel-good project, or, as has been suggested by one uninformed commentator, virtue signalling. This is a project to plant 150,000 trees over 4 years, and the precursor to a much larger project over 25 years. The Kirklees Forest Project is not just about capturing carbon, it is about flood resilience through strategic planting. It provides habitats for wildlife, reduces air pollution and noise levels in built-up areas, creates natural space which is good for communities, well-being and mental health. As you'll see from our amendment, it is not all council money we are using. It is leverage to bring in funding from other sources. It's an ambitious and worthwhile project, the sort of thing we need to be doing if we are to be a leading council on something that stands out in this country and beyond simply addressing climate change. We've again called for a much more ambitious investment in electric vehicles. Leeds City Council has 200 in its vehicle fleet, Kirklees 3. I know there are more to come, but it's piecemeal. We need to be bold. We need to regain the lead we once had that has been lost as a green council. We propose 127 electric vehicles, cutting emissions on our roads, lowering running and maintenance costs for our vehicles, and the investment in the charging infrastructure needed to support them. Not a matter for this budget, but we also need to see what we can do to set higher energy efficiency standards in our local plan through supplementary planning guidance. We can do this, and we should. With these three measures, we can make a beginning on the road to action. Without some sort of significant, substantial actions on climate change, then you simply make the words of the naysayers true. If your house is on fire, it is an emergency. You don't throw a cup of water on it. You call the fire brigade and get a hosepipe on it. Declare a climate emergency, yes, and then act accordingly. So I propose that after we have heard the Lib Dem amendment, that we have a short recess to consider the elements of the amendments that refer to a climate emergency and see if we can come to a consensus on this one crucial issue. The support for a declaration of a climate emergency was agreed on a cross-party basis, so why not an amendment to the council budget agreed by those parties who voted for the climate emergency and those who actually submitted amendments? And I suggest to the Labour Party that having a majority and taking on the views of other parties shows more strength and confidence in your administration than the times when you had to because you didn't have a majority. So I move the Green Amendment, and I also move for a recess after the Lib Dem amendment is heard.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Is that seconded?
Moving the proposal to have a recess under Council Procedure Rule 15. You need a seconder to that, and we'd have to have a specific vote on that element.
Are you seconding that?
Okay, so we need to vote on that, please. Are we doing consoles or show of hands? Yeah, show of hands for a recess. All those in favour? That's not been carried.
Well, you need to vote.
Oh, do still need to vote? Okay, those against?
Yep.
Okay, it's not been carried. We now have an amendment from the Liberal Democrat group. Councillor Lawson will move the amendment. The second, the Green has been seconded, but now we're moving on to the Lib Dem, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In rising to move the Liberal Democrat amendment, I'd just like to mention something about the protocols or the lack of them this year in making a budget. It seems that it's gone the same way as the key discussions this year, and that after years of convention where groups talk to one another about financial pressures and common goals, this year we've had a budget that's just been tossed at us and an attitude of, you deal with it. After having usually started budget talks in October or November, I can't help feeling that some of the common purpose that the residents expect from us as members has been lost. In talking to the Liberal Democrat amendment, I'd like us to think for a moment about how much control has been taken away from this and other councils by central government. Not only straightforward cuts to local government settlements and standstill arrangements that are in themselves effective cuts, but in this particular year, the stars have aligned to put economics on the same footing as astrology in terms of financial planning. This year, like no other, the lack of certainty caused by factors outside our control cast doubt on all kinds of public spending. The spending review is due, as is the fair funding review. The latter has potential to really impact on local government spending, and if, as feared, the deprivation factor is stripped out of the settlement, it will leave this council one of the worst off, not just in the region, but perhaps in the country. On top of this, we have the huge waste of time and money that is Brexit. The uncertainties about the future of our economy don't have to be catastrophic. If businesses stop investing and the public stops spending, government revenue will be hit, and that will further hit public spending, and business rates retention won't even bring us close to where we need to be. We have on paper what looks like a relatively modest set of amendments, but what you'll find is that they're based around people and communities. Core services and areas where we think that we are under an obligation morally to help, even if we are not under a statutory responsibility. They fall broadly into the categories of environment and communities. My colleagues will go into further detail on some of the items, but in broad terms, we feel that following the passing of the joint motion of the climate change recently, there are some things that we can undertake to do before the Working Party goes through the rigmarole of convening, sorting out the terms of reference, deciding an area of work, timescales, recommendations, and then reporting back to Cabinet. We're putting measures to improving congestion and air quality in Millsbridge, and we are delighted that Labour have come round to welcoming the West Yorkshire Combined Authorities investment in Lockwood and Longwood Bridge, after pouring scorn on the idea for years. A doubling in the amount of air quality measuring in Kirklees, coupled with the ask to progress and enhance the northern forest plans in our area, seem to us like easy environmental wins that can run alongside any climate change working party. What has been interesting in the working on the budget this year is how easily some of this could have been done at any point in the last year. In our amendment, we call for a scheme to support people arriving as new KNH tenants from homelessness. Kirklees Liberal Democrats proposed that a basic package of bed, bedding, refurb cookers and fridges, along with some basic appliances, should be offered. Not everyone will need it, and not everyone will need it all. But at £200,000, we think that a pilot could be funded out of the HRA that would help reduce reliance on hardship borrowing and go some way to bring longer-term stability and independence to those new tenants. And that's not some kind of crackpot scheme. That's something that we used to do that was valuable to protect some of our most vulnerable residents. Since its withdrawal, charitable organisations such as Acts 435 are reporting huge pressures and reporting examples of cases of families using carpets as bedding. As I said, we intend this to be a pilot so that a wider scheme can be rolled out once we have found out what works and where, and what partners will work with us. This isn't the only pilot in our amendment. We have 3 others based on Huddersfield Town Centre car parking reductions, a limited reintroduction of area committees, and a youth engagement programme. None of this money comes from the General Fund, and any of it could have been done over the last year had Labour wanted to. I've talked a bit about funding, and of course, all the amendments are fully signed off before they get to Council. But I just want to point out that this budget amendment is not asking for extra revenue spending or capital borrowing. We have used the housing revenue account, which is in surplus, specific reserve pots for pilots and one-off spending, and redirected borrowing to facilitate things such as the long overdue feasibility studies to regenerate towns and villages outside Huddersfield and Dewsbury. The amendment outlines our priorities as Kirklees Liberal Democrats and which way we think the Council should be going. I commend the proposal to the Council. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lawson. Is that seconded? Councillor Burke, please.
Seconded, Madam Mayor, reserve the right.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Okay, are there any comments on the motion or the amendments? And I can remind everyone that you can speak twice, but twice only. Have Councillor McBride, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The budget walks a fine line between, on the one hand, problems of managing further cuts and responding to ever-increasing demands for social care, and on the other, the ambitions of a Labour administration addressing the major urgent needs to grow our Kirklees economy. The two poles are reflected in the stark differences between the revenue and the capital budget. In the former, the ambition for growth is restrained to providing sufficient officer support to deliver the scope of the capital programme, meanwhile focusing our attention and priority on the vulnerable, both old and young. Meanwhile, the capital programme aims to deliver on the dynamic of growth specified in the local plan, which will be presented for adoption to this Council in a fortnight. Accordingly, the budget of £350 million over 6 years, 61% of the total, shows major investment in our road system, a fund to reshape the two major towns, and in the process significant mitigating measures to offset the impact of air pollution. Such ambition requires huge resources, and so it's dependent upon drawing in funding from both central government, the combined authority, as well as large amounts of judicial borrowing. On the revenue front, there is a £2.5 million fund for immediate town centre improvement to repair, clean and replace street furniture. There are other small amounts to enable ward members to do the same in their localities. Ward budgets have been increased to £20,000, and there is a £700,000 for one-off expenditure on a ward basis, and £250,000 to fund ward squad improvements. This is a proportional response to the needs of the two major towns on the one hand, as well as the townships and localities on the other. On the capital side, there will be a huge investment in access and infrastructure, which will support delivery of the proposed 31,000 houses in the local plan. It will complement private investment by City Fibre of £30 million to make Huddersfield and later Dewsbury the most advanced digitally connected towns in Britain, plus the almost £1 billion to be invested on Transpennine upgrade in Kirklees in the next 5 years. Our investment is to complement that and to roll out master plans for Huddersfield and Dewsbury in the next 6 weeks. Our connectivity, physically and digitally, will be unmatched in the north of England, and all of this will occur within the next 5 years. The capital budget enables us to address the challenges of the huge bottleneck at Cooper Bridge, to open up Huddersfield Southern Gateway, to upgrade the Leeds Road corridor, to provide significant relief for Ravensthorpe and Chidswell, and provide Kirklees' side of the £129 million Huddersfield-Halifax Road. All of these will significantly improve journey times, add to our cycling and walking networks, and will also involve major greening programmes. This will be our biggest contribution to climate change by speeding up the traffic, reducing emissions, and by greening, offset the air pollution. The town centre investments have their own greening programmes. We're thus targeting the budget to achieve both regeneration as well as environmental objectives. The Dewsbury plan completes and complements the Pioneer House and the Learning Quarter. It funds major refurbishment of the market. The additional resources match fund English heritage investment in key buildings and open up spaces to create a parkland effect. In Huddersfield, the investment will provide for a remodelled library, gallery and museum, which will be a focus for visitors. In both centres, these capital initiatives, together with the support we've given to living in the towns, will significantly increase footfall and in turn enhance retail viability. We've also created a property investment fund whereby key loans may preserve buildings or act as a catalyst to private investments, as is the case with Kingsgate 2 and the refurbishment of the Co-op building. I sense in the Green and the Liberal amendments a similar direction of travel, some of which underestimates what is in the budget, some is indicative of our joint long-term objectives, and some is a question of timing. I recommend this budget, which will transform the future of Kirklees.
We're just having a few technical difficulties at our end, so please bear with us. Councillor J Taylor, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, in speaking on the budget proposal from the Labour administration, I'd like to start by acknowledging the comments that the leader made about ambition. His ambition has been plain to see for all over the last couple of years, especially when he attempted, unsuccessfully I might add, to unseat his colleague as leader a couple of years ago. I also thought he was very candid in his comments in the report that state in the last 2 years the administration has been putting in place so-called strong foundations. I'm pleased to see that he agrees with me that we've witnessed a wasted decade whilst Labour have run this council with no ambition, no plan and no strategy. He was, of course, a leading member of that administration, but I guess he'll be using the Corbyn defence. He was present but not involved. Madam Mayor, I think that our residents are right to hold him culpable for this failure over the last decade, alongside his colleagues. And as we look at the changes that are being delivered now in our neighbours, both in cities like Leeds and Wakefield, and smaller neighbourhoods like Calderdale and Barnsley, we can see the real cost of this wasted decade. This is actually made all the plainer in section 2.4.2 of the report, which talks about business rates, which states that no net growth assumptions have been built into future years' business rate income projections. Herein lies the truth. That the fact is that when monies were being made available for investment over the last decade at West Yorkshire to drive growth locally, our Labour administration and the leaders of the Labour administration, like Corbyn, were present but not involved. It belies the comments set out in section 3.3.18, where it talks about significant capital investment in economic sustainability across the district to stimulate conditions to sustain and grow business rates. We've also seen the administration trying to claim the local plan will stimulate this increase in the economy, and yet there will be no net growth in business rate income. This wasted decade and Labour's approach of present but not involved is costing our communities. And whilst Labour claim to have found their ambition, it's 10 years behind our neighbours. I think the point hidden away in 2.4.19, when talking about their ambitious capital plans, is worth noting that the Treasury team have factored in a 40% slippage in capital programmes. In other words, Labour may have ambition, but they are still not demonstrating the ability to deliver. This is an issue I've picked up many times through our scrutiny panel, so whilst it may have been used to some of the members present and certainly some Labour backbenchers, it's a clear trend with this administration. But, Madam Mayor, there are some elements of this budget proposal that I welcome. You'll be disappointed if I did not take the opportunity to welcome their U-turn on libraries. I feel like I've been campaigning to protect our library service forever, and was in fact a key issue on the doorstep when I was first elected 4 years ago. So credit where credit is due. I welcome the Cabinet finally coming to its senses and agreeing with me that libraries are a cornerstone of our early intervention and prevention strategies, and we should, for any U-turn proposed by this administration, acknowledge it and welcome it. I also welcome the proposed investment in libraries and public buildings, as seen in the capital plan, and thought I would look at what this would mean. Regrettably, the answer I got was that there are no firm plans in place, so once again, this is an aspiration rather than a firm commitment with detailed costings and plans. I've not had the time to look at all elements of the capital plan in the same way, so I do wonder how much of this much-vaunted ambition is more than the paper it's written on. In finishing, Madam Mayor, I would just like to look a little more closely at the MRP proposals. Last year, this administration stated that the MRP unwind would be accessed over a 10-year period and added to reserves to partly meet future increased waste costs.
30 seconds, Councillor Taylor.
Only 12 months in, and as soon as Labour have a majority, prudence is abandoned, and instead of a measured drawdown of the funds over 10 years, there's an immediate push to draw down as much as possible, as quickly as possible, resulting in a further 8.8 million being drawn down over the next 2 years to meet current spending needs. and as a result, little is being ring-fenced to address the potential increased costs of waste once the PFI contract comes to an end. This imprudent use of reserves is something the administration seems addicted to, is also now extended to public health spending, with reserves of £834,000 being drawn down to prop up spending in line with and kick down the line decisions to reshape the services.
Thank you, Madam Taylor. Thank you. Councillor D. Hall, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I rise to make a comment on the Green Amendment. This is a very short comment, and in fact it takes the form of a question to officers. At the bottom of the second page of the amendment, it talks about Kirklees recycling initiatives, and I agree with Councillor Cooper. The level of recycling in the borough is now terrible compared to what it was, and something does need to be done about it. However, in the Green Amendment, there is no cost to this suggestion in the figures on the next page. So in other words, we're asked to vote either for or against something in a budget amendment when we're considering figures where we don't actually know how much it's going to cost, whether it's revenue or capital, or how it's going to be paid for. Could officers please comment on why this amendment has been passed for discussion today when the necessary financial information is not present?
Thank you, Councillor. Can you just clarify exactly where that we should be looking? Members, we're just going to adjourn for a short while so we can clarify the position. Okay. Thank you. I'm happy to carry on, Councillor Shade. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Bellamy, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I'm rising to speak on the Lib Dem amendment, and I'm interested again to see that the bridge across the River Colne and a new access road into Slathwaite again has appeared. Now, I understand the reasoning for a new road into Slathwaite, and I really do. And I could really perhaps be persuaded to support it. However, I've asked before, and I'll ask again, have the Lib Dem group actually thought this through? And if so, would they mind sharing with me exactly where the idea of this new road would be proposed to go? Because at present, the only possibility I can see for it is either you would need to destroy or take out an entire industrial estate or construct something on the scale of a massive suspension bridge. Thank you. Or a flyover.
Thank you, Councillor Bellamy. Any more comments on the motion or the amendments? Councillor Uppal, please. Sorry. Oh, sorry, Councillor Hall, sorry. Technical problems.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This time I rise to speak on the budget itself. We're all keen on recycling. And actually, I've been looking through some of my old budget speeches. And because this is a very recycled budget, I almost felt like recycling the budget speech because you could say exactly the same. In fact, I might publish them, then small bookshops can make some money out of it. There's a lot of recycling. There's a lot of recycling of old ideas in this budget. And the Labour administration always trumpet how much money they're going to put aside for Huddersfield and Dewsbury. But then again, they've never spent any of it. They never spend any of it to any generating account. It's just sat there. In fact, it's worse than that because it's not even sat there. It's just a promise of future borrowing. It's all promises we hear every single time, jam tomorrow. And 10 years on, we've seen our town centres decline and decline to a shadow of the former selves. Now, why should we entrust this Labour cabinet to regenerate our town centres when they can't even keep the streets clean? As of this coming year end, the Council's total debt is estimated by officers in this report to be £546 million. Last year, the capital plan was set then for a further £389 million over 5 years, which is quite a rapid expansion. This budget ramps up the capital plan over the next 5 years to £577 million. That is more spending in the next 5 years than our total consolidated debt. And we are also told in the report that the Council's total debt after the next 3 years will be £750 million. That's one heck of a lot of debt, Madam Mayor. It's a huge financial burden on future generations. Councillor Pandor has also said he's not even confident about the revenue budget for the next few years. So how he can promise such a lot of borrowing is anyone's guess. Yeah, Labour's magic tree. Now, contrary to Councillor Pandor's doom-laden introduction, we know that the government has sent the council some unexpected windfalls this year. An extra £5 million in year grants, another £5 million next year. It's all in the report, Councillor McBride. The Cabinet has also decided, as Councillor Taylor has said, to throw prudence to the wind and grab as much of the MRP money they can. There is no provision, Madam Mayor, for any regeneration capital for other towns or village centres, other than Huddersfield or Dewsbury. There's still no extra money to increase school places in most parts of the borough, even though people can see the extra houses stacking up through Labour's disastrous local plan. There's still no commitment to improve the cleanliness of the borough, the bin collections, the terrible state of the roads. And this is because Labour is not listening to people's concerns. They sit with their fingers in their ears, awaiting the next paycheck. Now, nowhere is this sorry state of affairs better exemplified than the issue of fly tipping. And ever since the administration's disastrous decision to limit access to the tips, we and residents have been warning of the resultant increase in fly tipping. And every time this has been raised in this chamber, the Cabinet member assures us there is no problem with fly tipping, there has not been an increase of incidents, etc. And now, months later, we see the Deputy Leader of the Council admitting, guess what, we have a big problem with fly tipping. And here he is, ladies and gentlemen, on the front of no less an August organ than the Spenbury Guardian, with a lovely picture of Councillor Sheard in his best bib and tucker. And it refers to the scourge of fly tipping, And it's taken the Cabinet 2 years to grasp the fact we've got a problem with fly tipping. And everybody was saying it 2 years ago, because they are not listening. And his answer to this? Covert cameras in Coke cans. I mean, what a way to handle the affairs of this administration. What next? The environmental officers disguised as trees or pillar boxes, perhaps. Councillor Sheard with the new Jeremy Beadle. You've been framed. Labour is not listening. We need a proper budgetary process, subject to scrutiny, and running in tandem with the corporate plan and the priorities. And this last-minute effort, cutting out all opposition scrutiny of the budget, is not acceptable. It's the same old stuff, devoid of ideas or direction, as is the Cabinet, a spent force in its last throes. This Council is crying out for leadership, and if Councillor Pandor is unable to provide this, he should make way for someone that can.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Upall, please.
Oh, thank you, Madam Mayor. First, I just want to thank everyone who's been involved in putting the budget together. I know it's a long process, and I want to thank officers and Cabinet members and the Leader for the work that they've done. I also want to thank our council teams across the borough and all our staff. Our teams have really been at the front line of austerity, of the cuts, of the pressures to the services, to resources, to budgets. And, you know, that means it hasn't always been easy for them. They're the ones that are hearing stuff about how perhaps we're not doing things as well as we could be doing. And I really thank them all for all the work that they're doing for us, and I think we should all thank them. Just want to talk a little bit about the local government financial settlement. And it really is hitting the poorest and the most vulnerable the hardest. I know the government, and perhaps some of the Tories here, will talk about the additional funds that have been put in, which is about 1.3 billion to core spending power. But the core government grant has also been cut by £1 billion, and a lot of this additional funding is one-off bits of money, so it doesn't account for the overall impact on local government. We need a much more long-term settlement, and that's still missing. Government ministers have taken out more out of the local government department, more than any other, and that has led to local areas having to pick up the pieces. We've seen a decade of cuts, and you can't say that there's no consequences because of that. So if we look at the shortfall of funding in social care, that has impacted hospital admissions. If we look at the homelessness figures, the government's finally realised that this is an issue, and they've started putting some money into it now. But this has meant that the local welfare provision teams have been inundated. Housing officers are having to deal with additional problems with homelessness and rough sleeping. And if we just look at rising violent crime, Sajid Javid and the Home Office have finally realised that we need more police officers on the beat. And they've kindly said that we can increase the council tax preset to pay for it. And of course, youth services have been massively impacted, and we know what can happen when there is a void. One of the toughest things we're seeing really at the moment is that from 2020, ministers suggesting that they no longer want to take account of deprivation when it comes to funding. We've already seen unfair cuts to councils like Kirklees, and we've faced far more drastic cuts than the likes of Surrey and Maidenhead. So we looked at some House of Commons library analysis. Kirklees Council, which has a deprivation rank around 94, has seen cuts of £420 per household, while the Prime Minister's local authority, Windsor and Maidenhead, deprivation rank 306, has seen core spending power cuts of £205 per household. We can see how unfair that is. We know, unfortunately, it is a fact that people die younger if they are poorer. And we know that in Kirklees, we have an average life expectancy gap of 9 years. The government's own research shows that deprivation is one of the best predictors of the cost of basic services. So I really don't understand what they're doing. It is really shocking that we're seeing this. And we've currently got a one-year budget because we don't know how local government will be funded going forward. There's far too many uncertainties with the Fair Funding Review and the Comprehensive Spending Review. These cuts, what they mean in reality is that we're seeing children living in temporary accommodation for much longer. We're seeing increases in social care requests and child protection orders, and the loss of bus routes, which are affecting our local areas. I think my time's coming up, but I just wanted to say that councils like ours are doing the best that we can in these circumstances, and actually some of the work that we're doing on place-based initiatives are really encouraging, particularly the additional spending that we're putting into mental health initiatives, domestic abuse services and in dementia services. I'm really encouraged by
30 seconds, Councillor Paul. Thank you. Councillor Cooper, I'm just going to bring Julie Muscroft in. Julie, please. Thank you.
Okay. To respond to Councillor Hall's query, so as members will be aware, Council Procedure Rule 19.3 requires that amendments to the budget motion cannot be accepted unless the Chief Executive is satisfied, upon the advice of the Section 151 officer, that the proposed amendment is financially sound and sustainable. And the Chief Executive and myself have consulted with the Section 151 officer, and he has explained that he read the proposal as set out as a statement of intent after discussing that with Councillor Cooper, the leader of the Green Group. He believes it's generically expressed with no specific budget implications, and he did not therefore consider that it affected the soundness and sustainability of the proposal. It was therefore accepted on that basis in accordance with the Council Procedure Rule 19.3. Thank you.
One could read from that response that in future years it is not necessary to submit your budget amendments with any figures in.
Councillor Seif?
Yeah. Can I just point out, the other groups actually have an amendment. Where's yours?
Sorry, Councillor Seif, you can't.
Can I move on?
Yeah. Can we move on, please? I'm going to call Councillor Cooper, please. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad that's cleared up. I just wish I could criticise the Tory amendment. But it's actually quite difficult. I heard some of the things that were said by Councillor Taylor and Councillor Hall. This was a quote from Councillor Taylor about Labour. I don't want to really defend the Labour Party so much, but sometimes you feel you have to. He said that they were present but not involved, which pretty much describes your presence in this meeting, because you're not involved, are you? Because you're here. You're devoid of ideas and direction. That was from Councillor Hall. Where are your ideas and your direction? I'm not seeing an awful lot of that here at the moment. And like I say, I'm not here to defend the Labour Party. I'd say they're quite capable of doing it themselves. But yeah, I mean, there's plenty of criticism there. Town centres, yeah, I think they ought to do more in town centres. Made a few suggestions myself. Fly tipping, yeah, there's some things there about bulky waste and what you could do about it. But it has all the relevance of some guy mouthing off in the pub, doesn't it? Some guy mouthing off in the pub. What you've said here, and that's. And there is a real basic question. I really feel this quite passionately that we have a responsibility as politicians to put forward our opinions and our views on how the council ought to be run. It's a basic thing. It's a basic thing. If you're standing for election, if you're putting yourself forward in front of voters out there, they will expect you to say what you're going to do about the council's budget. And you've not done it. You've failed on the most basic element of a political party, what it needs doing in here. You've failed. There's no, what's...
I'm sorry, I will not accept remarks like that.
Madam Mayor, Councillor Cooper is meant to be talking to the Labour budget and he hasn't mentioned it yet.
Councillor Cooper, carry on, please.
Thank you. So I ask you again, because you've really avoided this right the way throughout. You've doled out plenty of criticism. I could dole out a bit of criticism about the Labour administration. But why no amendment? Why haven't you put anything forward? Is it simply that it's such a rotten hand that's been provided by your government that it is impossible for you to put an amendment? There is no way that you can actually put something forward which you would agree with, because it's such an awful hand to have. So tell us, what is the reason? Why is it that you've failed in this duty as an opposition party? What is it? Please tell me.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Burke, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just want to raise a couple of points with our amendment and the fact that our amendment is not asking for any extra revenue, spending or for any borrowing. There's a lot in there, and I've listened to what's in the Labour budget, and I'm sure there's a lot in there, and there's a challenge there to try and accept and look at some of the things that we have, which could be taken on board with regards to waste management, air quality improvements, town centre car parking, area committees, and in particular youth engagement. And I'd like to speak a little bit more about youth engagement and where we stand in this authority, I think, and what we need to do. We have a long-standing commitment to maximising the opportunities for all children and young people. This includes supporting their progression into education and training and then employment, enabling them to fulfil their potential. We recognise that economic and personal circumstances present some groups of young people with huge challenges to progression, and we are passionate about tackling these barriers, particularly those who need support the most. We need to tackle the ever-increasing levels of knife and gun crime among our young people, to be proactive in preventive measures and not just react when these incidences occur more frequently in our borough. We need to further enable young people to have a voice and contribute to society and the communities they live in. We already have an excellent work taking place with our Youth Council, and we need to carry on supporting this vital work. Young people can and do contribute to society and the communities they live in. Through the work with commissioning partners, we can help young people to develop skills, build networks and discover possibilities that they may not otherwise have had exposure to. Through the provision of positive activities and group work, young people can be given the opportunity to carry out volunteering, learn new skills, develop a sense of community responsibility and be encouraged to think about their own future in a positive way to reduce the risk of not being in education, employment and training. We are determined that we can make further improvements, and there are clear benefits to the local economy, wider society and most importantly to young people and their families in increasing youth engagement and progression. Kirklees needs more young people to successfully progress to further and higher education and also into skilled employment. The failure to engage young people increases the costs associated with health and social services and contributes to the challenges associated with long-term unemployment and crime. And it's no coincidence that the lack of youth service that we have and the correlation between that and the increase in knife and gun crime that we've seen locally in recent times. So I'd ask for this to be considered and also the other amendments that we have put forward.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Councillor Shade, please.
Yes, Madam Mayor. I really want to address the comments made by our members on the Conservative Party, because I think what their comments have demonstrated a fundamental difference between the Conservative Party and the Labour Party. It's always been tradition of the Labour Party, as soon as we elect a leader, we start suspecting them. We don't trust leaders. We start suspecting them straight away and starting criticising. I have not been reluctant over the years to criticise our government. I criticise them on the right to buy and not ending right to buy. I criticise them on not reversing privatisation. I criticise them on not failing to end PFIs. I criticise them on privatising parts of the old service and privatising our school service. I'm quite happy to criticise our central government when they get it wrong. But their party are not happy. They will not criticise one little bit. And in fact, 2 years ago, if you remember, Robert Light stood up at this meeting and said that he welcomed the government's cuts because the Labour government gave Kirklees too much money. So they enjoy the cuts, but they will not criticise the government. Yet around the country, we've got other Conservative-controlled local authorities going bankrupt. Now, I'm not one to jump on a bandwagon and say it's mismanagement by those authorities, because I think some of those authorities face the same problems that we face. There are some real pressures on Shire counties on their social services. Have got real problems with the funding of local government. But this group will not acknowledge it for 1 second. They will not acknowledge that we've had a penny taken off us. They stand up praising their government for the crumbs that they've let fall off the table, where we know that money's been diverted to the south east, down to the Shire counties, away from London boroughs, mind you, but to the Shire counties, to Leafy Province. We know what a set of radbags they are. We know what the government. We know that how mealy-mouthed they are about not attacking or criticising their government in one little bit. So I say that is a fundamental difference between this party and that party. We are in touch with reality. They are off in cuckoo land somewhere, and they continue to whine about the outset.
Thank you, Councillor Shade. Can I just remind you what I did say at the beginning of the meeting about being respectful throughout? Councillor Patrick, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To say we haven't put a budgeted amendment in, it seems that everybody wants to talk about us instead of talking about the budget in front of us or even the amendments in front of us. All opposition groups on this council will know, as Councillor Lawson has already said, that we've just been given 1 week to make an amendment to the budget. 1 week. Everyone in business knows that that is an impossible task with a budget the size of this. What the Lib Dems and the Greens have done is submit wish lists rather than budget amendments. And as we've already discovered, Councillor Cooper's budget doesn't add up. Personally, I think when I think back to when I first started as a councillor, we used to start the budget process back in October. And all groups got the opportunity to look at the detail of all the services. And even then, we thought we should have access to more information. But the situation we find ourselves in these days is we don't see hardly anything at all. And you can't put together a proper budget amendment when you don't have access to that level of detail. It's just a nonsense. It's a nonsense. We've heard a lot of people in the chamber talk about the shortage of money, and indeed there is a shortage of money. We know that. Nobody's denying that. But what it's actually spent on is somewhat of a priority to individual groups. To the Green Group, it's okay to spend £500,000 on trees. I wouldn't have thought that were a priority when the council's so short of money. In the Labour budget, we're going to spend £8.5 million taking play areas out. If we're so short of money, why is that such a high priority? Where's that come from? If the increase of 2.99% raises £5 million, why are we going to spend all that taking play areas out? I think you've got a look. I do wonder how many people in this chamber have actually seen all the detail of this budget, including Labour councillors. Probably 9. Probably the cabinet have seen it, and nobody else has seen it. We won't be supporting the Green budget. You'll be surprised. You'll be surprised to know. You want to plant a lot of trees in my ward to stop flooding, but it won't actually stop flooding. What we need to do as regards flooding is look at the catchment and the dynamics of surface water flooding. And we're actually doing that in our meetings with the Environment Agency at a regional level. That's actually been done. We could also do with collecting more water, not losing the water. And we could do with talking to Yorkshire Water about collecting water and not decommissioning reservoirs. There's plenty of things that can be done, and there's plenty of detail to study without simply going out and, dare I say it, splashing £500,000 simply planting trees. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Patrick. Councillor Murgatroyd, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, this is the first budget debate I've been to since I've got elected in May, and obviously the debate does have some way to go, but I have to say I have been pretty disappointed, actually, and a bit surprised by the quality of some of the comments so far. In particular, I felt, some of the comments by Councillor Hall and others, actually. It seemed almost as though the name of the game was just making personal abuse in comments instead of actually presenting an alternative. And I'd like to say, I just wonder what people watching this on the webcam would think, because I don't think this adds anything to local democracy, and we know that many voters, many residents are increasingly cynical about democracy. And the austerity agenda that has been carried out over the last 10 years has further undermined trust in local politics and local democracy. So I think it is beholden upon all of us, therefore, to actually it's our duty to deal with the difficult situation caused by austerity in a principled way. And I actually think, let's look at some of the principles that underpin this budget: protecting the most vulnerable communities, promoting equality and social justice, and promoting economic sustainability. And I'd just like to focus on that last point about economic investment, because it's absolutely crucial that, despite austerity, we do everything in our power, not just to invest in big infrastructure projects, which obviously is part of the budget, but also more local, place-based focus. And what a contrast, actually, I would say, with the Conservatives, because this administration is adopting a radical local wealth-building agenda, and this has massive potential to actually retain wealth in our local communities and unleash enterprise in our communities as well, using kind of innovative forms of enterprise like co-ops and mutuals, as well as encouraging local businesses. So the context of the Kirklees economic strategy for this budget is important to remember. And I think that's really important, because we have to show the people of Kirklees that local democracy can actually affect positive change for their lives. And that's what this budget is all about. So just one last point, really. I just wanted to comment on some points made by Councillor Taylor earlier in the debate, because he kind of characterised the last 10 years in Kirklees as wasted years. But what he failed to do is he failed to actually explain the context, that, as it's set out, actually, the facts, the figures in 2.1.4 and 2.1.5, that Kirklees is one of the lowest funded councils, and that national funding reductions and service pressures on the council has resulted in cuts of 199 million over 2010 to 2019. So if we're going to reconnect with the people of Kirklees, if we're going to show them that local democracy does work, I agree with what Councillor she said. We have to be honest. We've got to actually explain the situation as it really is. And I'm afraid that this government has followed an agenda that has cut services to the most vulnerable, while at the same time the gap between rich and poor has exponentially grown over that period. Our infrastructure is being systematically run down and our public services debased. And that ultimately...
30 seconds, Councillor.
Thank you. Yeah, that doesn't just damage the lives of the people we represent. It actually damages democracy. So can we have... I'd like to hear something a bit more worthwhile and positive than name-calling.
Thank you, Councillor Murgatroyd. Councillor O'Donovan, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I agree. I want to see something much more ambitious as well. I'd also like to see the Tories in the room to hear what's going on at the moment. So not only do I agree with colleagues that we have no budget amendments from the Tories, we're not even in the room at the moment to hear what most of us have to say. This is my 8th budget council. I've been here longer than some and not as long as others. But when I read the amendments this time, I did have an air of deja vu, and I was searching for something to say that might be a little bit different this year to in previous years. So what I did with the vast amount of spare time that I've got with 2 children and a job and etc., I had a look at the budget amendments over the last few years, along with this year's. And I went back and I looked at Libs, Dems and the Greens and the Conservatives, and I found waste management strategies, air quality strategies, money for town centres, money out of the town centres, electric vehicles, bridges, Tulsa Museum, money in, street scene, money out, flood alleviation, Some interesting stuff, and again, some interesting stuff again this year, some stuff that's already happening. But for me, and maybe because I've had children since I became a councillor, your perspective changes a little bit. The glaring omission from previous amendments from groups, and the glaring omission this time from debate, is children. It's children's services. We are charged with the responsibility of doing everything we can to protect the life chances, the safeguarding of children in this body. We're all corporate parents, not just this group, not just this cabinet, everybody in this room. And I am disappointed that there aren't amendments this year and in previous years that really gets to grips with children's services. Because we've done a good job. There's more to be done. But the job of protecting children, providing extra special needs education for children, educational psychology for children, shoring up children's centres and care homes, there's always more to be done. That's why it's quite apt to modern Valentine's Day, isn't it? I've got a lot of love for our Labour budget, which is probably no surprise for me. I've got a lot of love. Because what it does this time, amongst other things, Madam Mayor, is it acknowledges that we've seen bear with me, a 24% increase in the number of children and young people being educated in special schools. That's from 105,500 in 2013 to 131,000 in 2017. We've seen a 35% increase in 5 years of the number of children needing SEND statements, special educational needs statements. And what this budget aims to do this year, and if we get the settlement from government going forward for the next few years, is putting £1 million into improving the SEND offer, and puts in £600,000 this year and more millions in the years to come in providing more housing for children in need. There's also talk in the budget, which is really positive, about making sure that we place more of our young people in care within Kirklees and providing more spaces in children's homes. That's the omission that we see from other groups. Other groups will say that they talk about vulnerability and they protect the vulnerable. A few years ago, Councillor Hall talked about no group having a monopoly on caring. He said, no group has a monopoly on caring. Well, do you know what? It seems on this budget that the Labour group have a monopoly on caring for our most vulnerable.
Thank you, Councillor Donovan. Councillor Sims, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think about this time last year we had Councillor Panda and Councillor Sheeran stand up in this chamber and said, "Work with us, cooperate with us, work with us to make Kirklees a better place." And I think he spoke with a forked tongue, both of them, because since then they've never tried to work with us. They didn't even want to discuss the budget early like we usually do in October, kept it behind closed doors, and then as soon as they got that seat that made them full control of the council, things stopped. And we knew, and this is why we haven't put a budget in, that whatever happens today with those other parties, you won't get anything. It'll be the Labour budget. That's going to happen. And I'll tell you for why. Yeah. I do get a few things right now and again, Mr. Barron. Not like the bus gates, but, you know, there we go. I've been a councillor now for 31 years. Except for about 3 of those, it's been Labour run. And I can remember out of all those that each time they've maxed up the council tax and blamed whatever government was in power that they've kept them short of money. They've put programmes like they've put forward today. They put the town centre one last year and the year before that, and they've done nothing. There's no meat on the bones in this budget to say what they're going to do. Just same as last year, no meat on the bones. You're going to do it. It's pie in the sky because you're not spelling out what you're going to do. I come now to the Greens, right? They're going to plant all these trees in our area. He doesn't even talk to ward councillors about it. And he doesn't realise that 2/3 of our area is above the tree line. So your trees won't grow. Be a waste of money on. Total waste of money. Yeah. So you've not looked into that, have you? And while I'm up, I might have time just to say, fracking. Greens are scaremongering about fracking. I'm telling everybody here now, no fracking will take place in Kirklees. Go and tell your members, because the strata under Kirklees is not fit to do any fracking. So you can go out there, raise your arms up and say, lovely. And this has come from a real direct source. There will be no fracking in Kirklees. Right? That comes from Councillor Ken Sims. Spread it. Right? So, stop your scaremongering, you know. Electric cars, fine. Have you thought about what's going to happen when all cars are electric? What's going to happen when you come to dispose of those batteries? Huge batteries the size of that desk, made of the most polluting bloody stuff there is on the planet, and, you know, you're advocating more. And you don't know how to deal with them. You don't know how to deal with them. Hydrogen is the one forward, not electric cars. There's going to be a huge problem with those batteries. Take that, Councillor Cooper, back. Talk about it in the Green Party. Let us know what you're going to do about that. Thank you very much. I rest my case.
Thank you, Councillor Sims. Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Simpson, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If colleagues will allow me, as this is my first time speaking at full council since my election, I'd like to very briefly take the opportunity to acknowledge the unfortunate circumstances in which the Denberdale by-election was called. Though elections and by-elections are a necessary part of our democracy, none of us want to be taking part in them because of someone else's ill health. So I just want to pay tribute to Billy Jewett for his commitment to the Denberdale Parish Council throughout all the years, and send him my best wishes right now. Colleagues, times are incredibly tough. Services are under enormous pressure. Demand in services for vulnerable people, in particular children, is increasing. Yet we continue to deliver these services with a continuously shrinking pot of money. None of us think things are perfect. Far from it. We wish we could do more, but this is a council with its priorities straight. We're investing in the borough and we're protecting the most vulnerable, while Tory councils like Northamptonshire and Tobago bust. This council, the second worst funded metropolitan authority in the country, in this budget is investing an additional £8 million of revenue in high needs pupils, £1.4 million on school transport, £1.9 million on mental health, £800,000 a year on sexual health and support for substance misuse. In terms of capital, we're investing an additional £30 million in children with special educational needs and disabilities, £10 million in children's services, £21 million in dementia daycare and complex needs, £9 million in the Play strategy, and that's on top of the £45 million for town centre regeneration and £150 million of major infrastructure investment in the borough. We need to stop talking ourselves down as a council and start talking ourselves up, because there are a lot of things that this council is doing in very difficult circumstances which we can be proud of. And finally, I just want to address the claim from our Conservative colleagues that there's lack of ambition in the budget. I have to commend you, because it takes some real courage to stand up in this chamber and claim a lack of drive or ambition whilst providing no proposals of your own. It's clear to me whether Conservatives are in Westminster, Brussels or Kirklees, they have no plan, no alternatives and no idea about the damage their government is causing to the residents of our community. This is a Labour budget which invests in our borough, supports our most vulnerable and protects the services that matter. It's a budget we can be proud of, and I'm proud to vote in favour of it.
Thank you. Councillor Eastwood, please.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. We're pleased to know this is going to be short and sweet and to the point regarding an aspect of our amendment. and that is in connection with the town centre car parking. There are several well-reported reasons behind the failing high street nationally, and you do not need to look far to see that decline across the towns in Kirklees, in particular Huddersfield, with a high percentage of retail units already empty, some in the process of closing, and others no doubt surviving by the skin of the teeth. It is therefore pleasing to see much needed investment being planned for. However, much of that planned investment is to come in future years, by which time how many more retail units may then be empty. And so some form of pro-action needs to be taken now. So what can the council do? We all know that the council alone cannot solve all the high streets issues, but there is one particular area that this council can try to improve upon, and that is improve footfall into our town centres. Back in December, we were told that the free parking slots given by council were a bonus, but it was, whilst welcome, far too minimalistic and short-term, and hardly the spark needed to ignite long-term footfall improvements. That's why we are recommending a bigger spark, a bigger catalyst, by offering a pilot scheme of free parking all year round across all Kirklees car parks between the hours of 3 p.m. and 5 p.m. during the week and all day on Sundays. I would even go so far as to suggest that we get this in place for Easter. It's not that far away. The cost for doing so is minimalistic to the overall budget, but it could just trigger that increase in footfall that our existing town centre businesses need, and for other future businesses to look to before moving in and opening up new ventures. I would therefore please therefore support the budget amendment proposed by the Lib Dems. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Eastwood. Councillor Homewood, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a few points, really, so hopefully it won't take too long. Just really firstly to back up what my other colleagues have been saying about the uncertainty in the funding. And that, to me, you know, having read through this budget, having been on the corporate scrutiny panel this year, and just generally what we see in the media and articles that you read, this seems to be the big issue. And I think it's interesting, Councillor Holm talked about it as windfalls. I think most of us see bits of additional funding that come as sticking plasters, really, to try to cover for, you know, impending disasters, really, in terms of finances. So it's just a continual kind of trying to save, you know, trying to have an emergency sticking plaster for issues when there's no, you know, no plan for sustainable funding for councils. You know, and I just think a couple of the issues, you know, think about adult social care. Apparently, Theresa May had a plan that wasn't changing. It was still, nothing had changed. But since then, there's been nothing about that. And you read through the report for the budget, and everything's about the government will bring forward a green paper on this or that. When's it going to happen? Because we don't see it. We don't seem to see it happening at all. And I just think this other bits here, just picking out a few things as you go through that just show the government's real kind of disdain for local government and councils about how we're supposed to cope with these things. I noticed, you know, that we talk about the funding for special educational needs. The government themselves say we've got a 7 million shortfall, but they're going to give us 1 million a year, you know, as a transition period. I mean, if we're talking about kids at school, if the kids start in high school this year, they'll have finished school by the time that money comes through. So how is that dealing with the problems that we have now? I noticed little things like, for the last 3 years, they haven't given us any additional cost towards free school meals, so we have to find our own costs for the inflation that and other cost pressures that relate to that. So there's just nothing there that seems to me to show any understanding. And I saw today that one of the transport ministers made a comment about, when he was being questioned about bus services, said, well, why are you complaining to the government, you know, to talk to your local councils, it's them that's cutting the services. There doesn't seem to be any consideration about the funding and the pressures that we're under. I just also wanted to touch on the point that was made about the business rates projections by Councillor Taylor, because, you know, I'm not going to pretend that I can answer the question as to how the projection was calculated. But it just seems, my recollection since I've been here and before, is that the Conservative group have continually opposed the local plan in terms of development for housing, business space. I don't know what their plan is. The expectation is that we'll get additional business rates if they don't support development in the area. So I'm trying to understand how that works. And the final thing I just wanted to say is this is my third budget. And I can recall, if we're going back only 2 years ago, back to 2017, and in the period before that, I can remember sort of real concern about how as a council, we were going to make sure we balanced our budget, how we were going to stop spending our reserves to make sure that we actually, didn't go bankrupt. And in 2 years, we've managed to actually come to a position where we've got a balanced budget, it's sustainable. We're actually being able to put money back into some of the areas that we had to cut from in the past when we were making, faced with the tough decisions to make. So I can't really see how we can sit here and say that that the Labour Group isn't showing leadership on those points. I think we actually have moved forward. We might have slightly different views about what we would prioritise, but I don't think the evidence bears out that we're not taking the decisions that we need to and that we're not leading the council. So I think my colleagues in cabinet have done a good job there, and I'll certainly be supporting the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Iredale, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mine is very short, sweet as well. I am speaking on behalf of the Liberal Democrat amendment to reinstate area committees. When I was first elected last century, a good while ago, we did have area committees. They were an amazing way of working together with officers and from various parts of the council, and to pool funds so that our resources could be made more effective where they were needed. Since the committees were abolished, we do not have the same opportunity to get together with our residents and discuss issues which concern them. Area committees do bring together the local knowledge that is important to our job. It is important for us as councillors to be able to speak to our residents in a suitable public arena, and this is what the area committee enables us to do. To reinstate area committees would be, in my opinion, an amazing way of restoring confidence in this council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Iredale. Councillor Smith, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I just thank Will for his kind comments about Billy Jewett. It was a well-made point and well received. Thank you. I'm rising to comment on the amendments as proposed by the Green Party and the Lib Dems. With the state of the waste service, the recycling rates, the decline in town centre, which happens to be in the only ward represented by the Green Party, I find it pretty poor that the Green Party thinks the way to improve our area is to plant 150,000 trees in 4 or 5 years, to be followed by an unknown number over the next 25. I have 2 school-aged children, and I'd rather they were able to get to school along properly maintained pavements and roads, as opposed to ensuring they had a tree to plant when they get there. I also have a real issue with the obsession of electric vehicles. There seems to be a misconception in some quarters. Everything electric is the panacea, and everything diesel is the devil incarnate. Model diesel engines are actually very low emission, and electric vehicles are certainly not without their own impact upon the environment. I would like to point out that all vehicles will have been built in a factory having pretty similar environmental impacts during their construction, irrespective of their method of propulsion. Similarly, electric vehicles have huge lithium-based batteries that cannot be recycled, that lose huge amounts of their efficiency over time. The problems we are storing up for the future in disposing of these huge batteries that have a shelf life significantly less than the cars themselves is yet to be fully understood. Factor in also the cost of depreciation of electric vehicles because of concerns over this issue with batteries and with the impact upon residual values, and the total cost of ownership is nowhere near what we are led to believe. I also note in many cases, certainly in hilly areas where I live, the range of these vehicles is nowhere near what is claimed. Between charges in a hilly area in a fully laden vehicle, especially in the winter time with heaters being used, is sometimes less than 50% of the claimed range. So whilst I do agree with any efforts to reduce our impact upon the environment, I think that many schemes are being promoted at the present time that only show part of the real story and not the many disadvantages.
The Liberal Democrat amendment, rightly, in my opinion, focused firstly on waste management, which I agree should be an area of concern in Kirklees. It doesn't, however, go as far as suggesting a removal of the awful rules that the administration brought in regarding what can and cannot be taken to the tip, how many times a year you can go to the tip with a trailer, or indeed how long that trailer may be. This undoubtedly has a huge impact on fly tipping, and we should immediately be reversing these measures to reduce fly tipping in Kirklees. I welcome the recognition of money to regenerate towns and villages, alongside the long-awaited and much-anticipated town centre action plans for Huddersfield and Dewsbury. However, where is the detail of what this will involve, and is £200,000 really enough to address this across all the towns and villages? The Huddersfield Town Centre parking pilot again is a step in the right direction, but what I believe we should be doing is providing free parking throughout the week much earlier than 3 p.m, when most people are on their way home. I have reservations about just monitoring air quality and badging it as air quality improvements. It's all very well saying £10,000 revenue will cover the monitoring across 100 locations, but what are you actually going to do to improve the air quality? What I would like to see a lot more of in this chamber is a recognition of what it is we are here to do. For far too long now, we have seen meeting after meeting swamped with politically motivated motions about things which this council has absolutely no control whatsoever. We see the Labour administration repeatedly masking its awful management of this council by passing the buck for all its failings onto the government. People pay their council taxes and expect to receive a service in return. They want their roads in a condition that they can drive their cars, not unmaintained roads with potholes. They want their bins collected. They want the council tip to be a place where they can take their DIY rubbish and garden waste. They want school places, dentists, doctors, road infrastructure to be considered before loads of new houses are approved. Madam Mayor, the people of Kirklees are being shortchanged by this administration, and neither substantive budget or either amendment goes anywhere to addressing this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Munro, please.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to say a few words on air quality improvements as tabled in our budget amendment as follows. We, Kirklees Liberal Democrats, understand the significance of poor air quality impacting on health, and it cannot be emphasised enough how important and right it is that all of us as councillors recognise this issue and the harmful effects air pollution can have on health. This is not only a public health issue, but a public health crisis. It is estimated that air pollution causes approximately 40,000 deaths a year, which I understand equates to 137 premature deaths per year across Kirklees. This makes air pollution the biggest environmental killer. The young, elderly and people with heart and respiratory conditions are most at risk from premature death, with recurrence of poor respiratory health. It has been calculated the biggest impact of air pollution on public health is from long-term exposure to fine particulates or particulate matter. According to DEFRA, it is understood there is no safe threshold. For the most part, particulate matter, and I'm sorry to have to give you a few facts here, is emitted during the combustion of solid and liquid fuels, such as for power generation, domestic heating and, more importantly, vehicle engines. In Kirklees, we currently have 9 air quality management areas which focus on key areas such as Ainley Top, Bradley Road, Leeds Road, junctions Scout Hill, Dewsbury, Edgerton and Huddersfield Town Centre. The levels of air pollution are regularly monitored and assessed. The benefits of doing this create awareness of potential harm and help inform an action plan aimed at reducing levels in order to mitigate the harmful effects. While there is no one-fits-all solution, officers can look at ways of addressing the issues. The local plan is likely to be adopted at the meeting on the 27th of February. With the development of 31,000 plus new houses across Kirklees, the impact of increased traffic on our roads will result in an increase in air pollution and particulate matter. Air quality management therefore needs to be an integral part of the planning process. It is important that we should be imposing strict conditions as part of that process with a targeted approach which will ensure that additional checks are carried out where there are new developments. If we were to increase monitoring to 100 locations, this would be a physical cost of £5,000 for materials and analysis. This would be a pilot coming out of reserves. Of vital importance, then, is that this Council must invest in additional monitoring infrastructure that is needed to measure air quality on all major roads across Kirklees in order to help mitigate the detrimental effects of poor air quality on all our lives, and do that now. Please consider that amendment. This then leads me on to the Northern Forest, which has the potential to generate environmental benefits, including improving air quality. As trees can remove gaseous air pollution, they can also absorb fine particles. And recent research suggests the planting of trees along the sides of roads can help reduce harmful nitrogen oxide harmful concentrations. The multi-regional Northern Forest is a long-term plan to plant 50 million trees adjacent to or in close proximity to the M62 corridor. Their beneficial effects will reduce the risk of flooding, improving water quality, providing opportunities for recreation and leisure, promote health and well-being, and tackle climate change. We believe there should be...
Can we have a bit of hush, please, while members are speaking?
Thank you. We believe there should be greater public awareness about the Northern Forest scheme and believe the scheme should be fast-tracked to enable our communities to benefit now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Munro. Councillor Mather, please.
Madam Mayor, I rise to support the Labour budget. Unlike the opposition, who has shown in their amendments that they either agree with the majority of our budget or are tinkering around the edges, the Labour administration takes responsibility for the whole council. For yet another year, we seek to minimise as much as possible the damage inflicted by this Tory government on our communities. It is not easy. In fact, it is now virtually impossible. No individual, family, enterprise, company or organisation can have 60% of its budget removed and not be in serious trouble. Pretending everything can go on as if nothing has happened is the most cynical of Tory narratives, and as we know, there are plenty of those. The fact is, between 2010 and 2020, councils will have lost out 60p out of every pound that the government provides for our communities in order to provide services. We know the Tories want to reduce grant funding to councils to zero. They could not care less about local people and the devastating effect the collapse of public services will have. This Labour administration will put local people and communities at the heart of decision-making. So even in these difficult times, we continue to protect the most vulnerable, invest in our towns, villages and communities. I would now like to focus on some of the things which the Labour administration is doing through the budget to regenerate our town centres. Some have been mentioned by my colleague, Councillor McBride, but I want to go through a list of things that are happening or will be happening. In the next couple of weeks, we will be announcing supporting our high street, and we will be looking at examples of maybe free parking, business rates, etc., etc. So some of the things that have been mentioned by the opposition are things that the Labour administration is looking at already. 2.5 million has been put into cleaning up the town centre and making it more attractive in terms of street cleaning, painting and planting. Next week, I hope the Cabinet will approve a further 1.2 million to fund supporting businesses to improve shop frontage, for example, in John William Street. we're relaunching our start-up and retention policy, which will either support businesses to stay in the town centre or move into it. We've completed public realm works on King Street through funding from the Combined Authority, working with developers of Kingsgate to bring forward a 6-screen cinema and hotel offer. We're currently talking to the owners of George Hotel and the Station Warehouse to see what support we can give them to bring forward a deliverable scheme, and that is what's happening in Huddersfield. If we move to Dewsbury, Pioneer House is due to complete by end of February, a 2.9 million investment. Kirklees College will be complete fit-out and will be opened in September 2020. The station gateway has been completed and looks fabulous. 19 Foundry Street, conversion of 1 floor to 2 one-bedroom flats completed in 2018, investment of 50,000. 28 to 30 Northgate scheme, investment of 200,000. Bull Street Pub, council investment of 390,000, opening in May. I can go on with my list.
30 seconds, Councillor Mayfair.
So can I just say, it is the Labour councillors who, day in, day out, show how we can translate our values into actions, actions that improve public services and better lives. Madam Mayor, I ask Council to support this Labour budget proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mayfair. I am aware that some of you are getting a little bit fidgety, and there's quite a bit of talking as well when people are trying to speak, and it's really distracting. We're going to have a 10-minute break, okay, to get out of your system. Okay. 10-minute break. Thank you. Continuing where we left off, Councillor Hill, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think we've still got a few trickling in. I think that tonight, and I'm not going to repeat what some of my colleagues have said previously, I think we've had some excellent points made by the Labour group about why this budget should be commended to members of the Council. But I do just want to say that I think tonight does show quite clearly who is genuinely invested in the future of Kirklees, as a council, as a borough, in its residents, and who's really just taking up space. I think we might not, as a Labour group, we might not agree with everything that the Greens and the Liberal Democrats have put forward, but at least they've put something forward. At least there's something on the table to discuss. Because I cannot agree with the view that it is pointless to propose an amendment if you don't have a majority. Actually, what that is democracy. What that does is put forward an alternative to your electorate, to members of this council, and I cannot subscribe to the point of view that to do so is pointless. Even though you might know that you won't win the vote in the council chamber tonight, you should at least have enough respect for your electorate to suggest what could and might be different. I believe not to do that shows quite clearly in what regard the modern Conservative Party holds the general public. And I also don't think it's irrelevant to discuss the Tory view on this budget.
Sorry, Councillor, please, can you show some respect and stop talking over when members are trying to speak?
Thank you. I also don't think it's irrelevant to discuss the Conservative Party's view on this budget, because we have a current Conservative government, a government that has been widely criticised by Conservative councillors up and down the country. Our Conservative group would not be going out on a limb to do so themselves. They wouldn't be breaking any kind of party line, because the current leader of the LGA is a Conservative councillor who has repeatedly criticised the nature of this government's austerity programme and what has been done to local councils and local resources since 2010. This Labour administration, any administration, can lead a council, but we can only play the hand we're dealt. So it isn't mudslinging and it isn't irrelevant to comment on the absolute utter lack of input from the very people whose political allies have taken the axe to Kirklees repeatedly over the last decade. Because we have a Conservative government, our Conservative councillors in this room tonight are the political colleagues and allies of the members of Parliament and ministers who have pushed through this government's austerity programme, who decide every single day how much money comes in to the coffers of Kirklees and thereby restrict what we're able to do with it. It is completely relevant to ask why, after almost 9 years of campaigning on a platform of continuing austerity, you have not got one single idea on how to make it work. Since that time, we've had 3 general elections, we've had multiple local elections, and every single time you have quite literally gone out onto people's doorsteps and told them that you think Kirklees should have less money. That's what the National Conservative Party have said they want to do, and you have not locally disagreed with that, like so many of your Conservative colleagues have up and down the country. So it is really, really telling that you will do that at election time, but when it comes to the actual bread and butter of running this council, all you can do is stand up and spout what from one or two of you was frankly just nonsense. You can complain about the timings and you can hide behind the processes and you can complain that you only had a week, but you are members of this council, and to admit that you have so little idea about its running, about its resources, about its functions, about its funding, about its powers is actually embarrassing. You can say that you only had a week to consider the budget, but do you not have any idea of what you'd even like to do? It's unbelievable. And I would also suggest, Madam Mayor, that to say, as I believe Councillor Sims did, that for the last 31 years Labour's just complained about having no money and this is no different. I think, first of all, it's factually untrue, but it's also willfully misleading. No, Labour's not run this council for the last 31 years. That's factually true. I think I must keep my record slightly different.
Sorry, just one moment, please. Councillor Sims, just wait a moment. Was it a point of personal? Can we carry on, please? Councillor Hill, please.
To suggest that for the last 31 years Labour has run this council and complained about having no money and that this is no different is not only factually untrue. I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, but I've been repeatedly interrupted from the beginning. I need more time. Madam Mayor, the clock kept going when you let Councillor Sims stand up and call me a liar.
Councillor Hill, I have been informed that the timer was frozen while that incident was happening, so carry on, please. And the second, Andrew.
I would suggest that to say that the Labour Party has always complained about having no money and that this is no different is not only factually wrong, but willfully misleading and deeply disrespectful to those who suffer every day as a result of Conservative ideological austerity and sheer bloody incompetence. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Councillor Sheard, please.
Yes, I noticed that Kath isn't here, so I'm quite confident in claiming the top trump prize because this is my 36th budget, as people were all bragging about how long they've been coming here. And Ken, I do remember the year that we reduced the rates by 5% to be rewarded in the following May by the biggest losses the Labour Party ever suffered in Kirklees. And I was here at the time, so we did. So your facts are wrong on that, and your facts are wrong on your numbers on weeks gone by. But I will always claim that it's always good to claim that we don't get enough brass because central government are pretty useless anyway. Whoever's in charge, and they never give us enough money because we're a lot better at spending it than central government are. We always have been, and we have also have been much more efficient. I wasn't going to comment on the pick and mix curate's egg of amendments that we've got today, but I've got to say I've got to praise them for one thing because they have managed to do what the Conservatives didn't do. They flushed out some of their philosophical thinking. By the amendments, they flushed out that we now know that the Conservative group are passionately against electric cars. Now, I can understand some rationale behind that, but what I can't understand the rationale behind is what they've demonstrated. They're passionately against trees. Speaker after speaker stood up against and argued against trees. The cars I can see, but the trees I just can't fathom. But I just wanted to address one of the things that was said about one of the parts in the Liberal amendment about car parking. That Councillor Mather addressed that she said we'd be looking at some of the suggestions on car parking. When you do, can I suggest that you look at the occupancy rates of car parks within Kirklees, within Huddersfield? The car parks are full. The occupancy rates are in the 98%. If the car parks are full, how does reducing the price and making them free bring more cars in? And if your car park is free after 3 o'clock, how many Yorkshiremen are going to say, and even women, some women are going to say, well, rather than come at 1 o'clock, I'll wait till 3 o'clock. So I'll reduce my shopping time in Huddersfield by 2 hours. So I think you've got to be very careful, because a lot of myths around car parking about what the effect they have. But definitely, I can't see how you can bring more cars in when our car parks are full. It just seems an absolute nonsense. You look at the signs you come in. It's not as if it's difficult to see, because as you drive around the ring road, there's a big sign that tells you how many spaces there are in the car parks and whether they're full or not. So it's not difficult to spot that. So I just think that it needs to be. Anyway, car parking always is a real myth behind it. It needs to be studied carefully.
Thank you, Councillor Shear. Councillor D. Firth, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I'd like people to put their hands up, those that have been coming here for nearly 30 years, because I've just about done, I think, about 26 of these budget meetings, and I've got to say, every budget meeting, when Labour have been in control, they've always asked for more money. More and more money. Which, you know, I've actually sat here at budget meetings 4 o'clock in the morning, 6:30 in the morning. I've seen budgets knocked up on a fag packet by the Liberals at 3 o'clock in the morning. You know, everything, you can't believe it. It's unbelievable, actually. But I want to know, why don't we try to cut our cloth according to our size? This is what I was always brought up to believe. If you haven't got all the money that you need, you don't need to close everything down. You just need to pare it down and thin it down till you've got money to play with. It's as simple as that. If you run it as a business, if this was a business, I've got to tell you, it would have been bankrupt years ago, because it couldn't have survived. But nobody tries to help it to survive. What we've got, and again, looking at the Green Party, by the way, I do apologise for the little outburst earlier on. Certain councillors have an effect on me, and, you know, I have to just have a go. But apologies for that, Andrew. Anyway, David got blamed for it, by the way. Sorry about that, David. What I will say is, New Street, Huddersfield, we find that the shops on there, if there are any open, they're either just closing or they're having a sale. Now, some while ago, Councillor Sims and myself, before a council meeting, were stood with our backs to the Pound Bakery, looking across the road. A guy said, "What are you looking at?" I said, "Well, what do you think?" He says, "Well, we used to do that in Blackpool, you know, and if you looked up in the air, you'd get 35,000 people all looking up there. Didn't know what they were looking for, but they were looking up there." Well, we were actually looking at a tree growing out of a windowsill, out of a window, it was a tree, it had green leaves on it in spring, and in the autumn they turned to brown. It's still there. It's still there. I've reported it. Now, this, I believe, is Newsham Ward. Am I right in thinking that New Street is Newsham Ward? Yeah. Why don't the Newsham councillors go down there and try to help some of those shops that are suffering? Because after the bus gates, and I've got to tell you this, everybody I speak to, and I speak to a lot of people, I don't just come here and go home and do nothing. I speak to a lot of people in the day, and they are all of the same opinion. As soon as those bus gates were put up, the business went down. We're losing Marks and Spencers. We can't afford to lose shops like that. They're the plying trade to encourage people into Huddersfield. You talk about what you're going to do at high streets. We've heard it all before. We're going to do this, this and this. I'm sorry, it's too little, too late. You've left it too long. If we'd have been doing this 2-3 years ago, fine. But we've not. We've not done anything. Actually, We don't have such a thing as preventative maintenance at this council. We wait till it falls down. And then we complain we haven't got the money to do it with. Come on, I've heard all sorts in this council today from varying councillors. Remember, I've come down here a long time and I'm not stupid, and I do know what's going on. And I do speak to the people I represent. I don't know how many of you people do, but I certainly do. And I'm looking to see a bit of a lift-off from what's been said today, because at the end of the day, we're all in the same boat, as has been said. David said it, I'll say it. But we've got to get ourselves sorted out. We've got to sort the council out. We were asked, come and join us last year. Well, nobody's. We didn't know about the budget till a week ago. How the hell can you plan a budget in 7 days? It's a total impossibility. There's a guy out there laughing. I don't think he knows what he's laughing at. But 7 days. 7 days to sort it.
This has been in the calendar for last year.
No. It's, Councillor Steve. Councillor Steve, it's not a point of order. Please sit down. Carry on, Councillor Firth. Carry on, Councillor Firth. Right.
So, we've talked about everything today. We've talked about flighting. We've talked about everything is going pear-shaped. We've got to accept that. It's not
30
good.
seconds, Councillor Firth.
Sorry?
30 seconds.
Well, why did you... I could have stopped before if you'd have wanted me to do. Good grief, come on. 30 seconds. Right, okay. 30 seconds. Well, no, I'm going to the egg in a minute and a half. So it's more than 30 seconds. Anyway, apart from that, I've half my speech I haven't done, but I've 30 seconds, I've 30 seconds. Put it this way, Donald does not agree with the budget, he doesn't agree with the Greens, he doesn't agree with the Liberals. If you want me to put your budget together, I will do it. But it's better than any of you three. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Firth. I do assure you we are stopping the clock. It's like being on countdown, is this? Councillor Ahmed, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I rise in support of the Labour Party budget. One of the biggest challenges for us in Kirklees and mirrors pressure across the country is meeting the needs of our families who have children with special educational needs or disabilities. Since the introduction of the Children and Families Act in 2014, there has been a significant increase in the number of children needing support with their education. In 2014, Kirklees Council had about 1,900 educational healthcare plan stroke statements. By 2022, this is expected to rise by 3,300 based on the current trends, over 70% increase over the period. This is not simply about volume increases, but the complexity of the need, particularly for youngsters with social, emotional and mental health difficulties, and those with autism, speech, language and communication needs. Whilst the national funding formula is bringing us more funding for schools, we are not gaining funding quickly enough, hence why the high needs block, children with educational needs, is projecting to overspend significantly. However, we are working together with our schools and settings on transformation programme as part of the High Needs Action Plan. To support this transformation and to improve the quality of education healthcare plan assessments, the encouraging news in terms of our investment includes increased annual revenue investment of 700,000 in the special educational needs and disabilities assessment and commissioning team. This has significantly increased the capacity of the team, and the experience for families is improving. There is further investment of 420,000 in early learning services, reflecting increased demand for support for youngsters with SEND to access early years education and childcare, and the increased provision of early intervention processes, portage support to parents. This further investment will support the needs of children as early as possible, which will hopefully prevent needs becoming more complex and potentially resulting in more expensive support packages in the future, ensuring the best possible start for these children. As part of the overall High Needs Action Plan, we are to support increased provision for specialist educational support. There's also a significant new capital investment proposed totaling 25 million, which has been factored into updated capital plans. This is to invest into alternative provision for primary and secondary age youngsters, as well as additional specialist places for SEM difficulties. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Councillor Arnott. Councillor A. Pinnock, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't think there's anybody in this chamber who would disagree with the fact that this council, in its relationship with the government, properties, so that the amount of money we can raise is ourselves is limited compared with other places. But traditionally, going back a long time, this council has always been near the bottom of the funding table, along with Stockport for some reason or other, which I can't work out. However, I have to criticise the way this budget has been organised. I've been on this council now for 23 years, and every year, sometime round about October, maybe November, we started talking about the budget, whether we were running the council or whether it was somebody else. That at least gets all councillors the opportunity to talk about what ought to go into the budget. And if the Labour administration has aspirations to involve everybody in what happens in this council, then they should start talking to the rest of us. And I mean that quite seriously, because otherwise we will all go around, the rest of us that is, chantering about how we're being excluded from consideration of these things. And that is not a recipe for success. Something that Theresa May could probably learn as well, actually. But let's perhaps not go there at the moment. I don't disagree with a lot of what's in the Labour budget. Somebody some years ago said, it might even have been Councillor Sheard actually, that the differences between the administration's budget and the amendments that were put forward was about, an odd 5% here and there. Well, all right, 1%. But the principle's still the same. Considering the fact that we've not had a great deal of time to put an amendment together, I want to thank Councillor Lawson for the work he's done in putting our amendment forward when, in consultation with officers, of course, we've managed to produce the things that we were particularly interested in, the things that we think the Labour budget doesn't quite do enough. And yes, this includes more trees, because the point about that, and it's associated with air quality, it will help to improve the air quality. And no, I wouldn't put them up on the moorland because they probably wouldn't grow very well. I don't think we're talking about that in any case. Air quality, well, I have a particular gripe about Chain Bar Roundabout, which I think should be an air quality management area, but it isn't, and I don't understand why, when Ainley Top is. Because I would have thought the amount of traffic going round that roundabout is very close to the same as Ainley Top. Yes, we've got a monitoring station there already, but I think it seems to get ignored. Please prove me wrong. I just wanted to say something about libraries. I wouldn't I? Having spent my professional life in libraries, I think they are absolutely vital. We do a great disservice to people if they get run down. And whilst I praise the activities of volunteers, I know we've not put a great deal of money into it, but the future should mean employing more staff so that
30 seconds, Councillor Pinnock.
we can create an even better service to do all the things with not only with the library service but with the library buildings, where there is quite a potential particularly Cleckheaton at any rate. So I commend our amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Pinnock. Councillor Khan, please.
It's come on. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to pick up from what Councillor Firth said. He said, all we need to do is, in terms of the budget, is play it down, thin it down. I mean, in terms of adult social care and children's services, how can you play it down and thin it down? You either help people or you don't. It's simple as. And it's not, when delivering services, children's services and adult social care, it is not something where business principles are always applicable, because people are not units. This is qualitative stuff rather than quantitative stuff. Of course, there's always better ways to do things, but we've been looking at better and easier, more efficient ways of doing things ever since I've been on council. And this is actually the most positive budget that I've seen since I got elected. And I'd just like to remind Councillor Firth of the wider picture in terms of adult social care. We still have a crisis in terms of funding. Theresa may have said austerity is over, but it certainly isn't, not for Kirklees or for other boroughs up and down the country. Kirklees Public Health has lost £3.5 million since 2016-17, with further cuts planned for the coming year. And according to the Association of Directors of Adult Social Services, the government has cut £7 billion from the social care budget in England since 2010. And that's the environment that we've been working in. The last few years have been incredibly hard for us and for the officers, and I commend the officers for all the work and the worry and the stress that this has taken to manage. I find it quite insulting the way people are mocking the way we've managed and our leadership for the last few years. People I know have worked round the clock and long hours to ensure that our children and our adults are all safe, and that we continue services and we continue prioritising the most vulnerable in Kirklees as well. Over the next 3 years, we've got a funding gap of £25 million, so it's not, the challenges are not over yet for us. We've got a target of £4 million pounds worth of cuts for 2018 and 19, alongside an expected volume growth totalling £3.6 million. So whilst we've got cuts, at the same time, we've got increases in demands, increases in costs as well. Now, as my colleague, Councillor Homewood, pointed out, we've been long awaiting the publication of the Social Care Green Paper, which was initially promised for the summer of 2017, and we're still waiting. It's disappointing that the NHS plan had not been accompanied by the Social Care Green Paper. NHS and social care sector are interlinked, as we know. Social care needs to be robust and sustainable for us to support the NHS to deliver safe and effective services. Our Labour vision is for a fully funded, high-quality social care system which prevents hospital admissions and frees up hospital beds to reduce the current record NHS waiting times. Now, Kirklees Public Health has lost £3.5 million since 2016 and 17, with further cuts planned for this year. And for the first time ever since records began, we've seen a reduction in life expectancy, particularly amongst women in deprived areas. The healthy life expectancy between someone living in a more affluent area of Kirklees in comparison to somebody living in a more deprived areas, the difference can be up to 9 years. Yeah. 1 in 3 adults in Kirklees has a mental health condition.
up from 1 in 5 in 2012. And this is why this budget is investing in mental health, we're investing in substance misuse, sexual health and dementia services, and 8 million into our play areas, because we care about the health and well-being of the residents in Kirklees. Madam Mayor, the Labour budget is centred on the needs of our residents and puts the well-being of people at the heart of everything we do, and I am pleased to commend this to the Council.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Councillor Turner, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I rise this evening to question the logic of the Lib Dem amendment, and in particular the amendments to the Libraries budget, which will probably come as no surprise to everybody, I suppose. As we all know, I have a passion for libraries, and working closely with officers in our communities, I have done all I can over the last few years to ensure we have a comprehensive and efficient service. Now, despite falling budgets to the failed programme of austerity, we have managed to keep 24 libraries open, with the help of hard-working officers and a dedicated group of volunteers. However, the proposal to increase the budget for the libraries is ill thought out and not based on the reality of the current situation. Whilst extra funding would always be welcome, to open an extra half-day a week across all 24 libraries would require an extra 600 days of officer time. But as we don't do lone working, it would also require an extra 600 days of additional volunteer time. And this is not recognised at all in the amendment. We have over 400 hard-working committed volunteers already working alongside officers in the service. The question is, where are the extra volunteers going to come from? And how are they going to be trained, given we have very limited staff in the service? And we're already working hard to provide a comprehensive and efficient service, and we have limited capacity to carry out the extra training that we required in a short space of time to deal with any large increase in volunteers, which we would need to make this amendment work. Thank you. Right, we'll ask them. Even if we could find these extra volunteers. Can I finish? All right, okay. We already have a long-term plan for the service, which we are working on, that will deliver a comprehensive and efficient service, fit for the future, within today's Labour Group's budget proposals. However, I would just like to finish by welcoming the annual appearance of the attempt to secure funding for the bridge from nowhere to nowhere. Madam Mayor, I can't support this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Councillor J. Taylor, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to speak briefly on the amendments, if I may. Firstly, much as I dislike disagreeing with Councillor Iredale, our former Mayor, I'm sorry, I don't agree with you when it comes to area committees. My experience of area committees, certainly in my patch, was it was too large, too geographically large, and didn't make effective decisions. It was very, very difficult for residents to engage with the area committee when you're expecting people from Kirkburton or Denbydale to either go to a meeting up in Golker or go to a meeting out in Slough, and they couldn't even get there. So I'm sorry, whilst I have a lot of sympathy with quite a lot of what's in the Liberal amendment, I'm sorry, on area committees I fundamentally disagree with you. Giving the money directly to ward councillors and enabling ward councillors to work within their communities to spend that funding is a much more effective way of doing that. In terms of the Green budget, I'd just like to, and David's not paying attention, but I'd just like to talk about trees, because I know how much David will appreciate that. I actually don't have a problem with planting more trees, but I do think that this approach is something we ought to be a little wary of, because the Green Party actually have form in this space. And Councillor Cooper in particular used to be responsible, and his group ran the Kirkburton Parish Council prior to the last set of elections when he lost his seat. When he and his group ran the parish council, they invested in trees. They bought fruit trees. They bought so many fruit trees they couldn't find places to plant them. And to be honest, Kirkburton Parish Council is a big geographic area. because it covers all of my ward, it covers part of Peter's ward, and it covers part of the Almondbury ward as well. And it got to the stage where they had so many fruit trees left, they were giving them away to residents to plant in their own gardens because they couldn't find anywhere to put them. Well, what's wrong with it, David, is they bought them all and then gave them away to affluent people for free. And in terms of the trees, there's talk in here of buying trees at £7 a pop for whips, whereas actually the Woodland Trust will provide them to community groups for free. So I don't understand why, Madam Mayor, perhaps if you could point out to Councillor Cooper that I'm actually the one who's on my feet speaking at the moment, not him. I community groups to plant trees. There's nothing stopping us doing that right now. We don't need to spend Kirklees money on that. Community groups can source it from the Woodland Trust, and we should be encouraging community groups to do that. And my final point is actually the right place to plant these trees, and I think it was made, I can't remember who made this point earlier on, is alongside the busy roads where they will have, I think it was Alison actually, where they'll have the impact on, CO2. Oh, and Peter. Now, my worry is saying you want children to plant them, kind of say you're wanting children to go and plant trees alongside busy roads, doesn't sound like the best solution to me. I mean, I recently had the ward squad out in my ward where I was asking them to do some tidy-ups in my ward, and they declined to do some work on some roads because they said they were too busy and dangerous for them to do any work on them. So really, should we be encouraging children to go and plant trees alongside busy main roads? I think not. Unfortunately, as a result, I won't be able to support either of those amendments. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Holmes, please.
I'm really speaking about the Labour budget, and I have a big problem when people start talking about the fact that there's no amendment means they don't care about my ward, and I'm sure many others do too. You spoke to my children, and you knew how many hours I put in, as I'm sure a lot of you do, if not all of you. You know how much I do care. For many years, I worked as an accountant, firstly as a finance manager and then as a management accountant. I've been through more budget processes than probably most people in here, and I know how budgets are constructed because I've done it. You wouldn't put a budget together and expect people to be involved and take ownership and approve it in 7 days. It just wouldn't happen anywhere else. So as something constructive, can I suggest that if you genuinely are upset that we haven't put an amendment in, and you genuinely want us to be involved, because there is a lot in the budget that I agree with, and if you would genuinely like us to work with you, then can I suggest that happens next time? Because one thing I'm really not liking about being a councillor now is the politics, because I find it causes... No, listen. It causes so many problems because we come in this chamber and so many times politics gets in the way of what we could all do together. We could have come in here with a budget that worked better for all of the groups. We could have come here and saved ourselves probably 2.5 hours of this that's been arguing for political point scoring in some cases. I'm not doing that. I'm genuinely asking, if you want us to be involved, if you want us to work with you, then ask us. I would like to work with you. I've probably got some experience that might be a bit helpful, as I'm sure others do, as I'm sure Lib Dems do, the Greens and the Independents. So if it's a genuine concern that we haven't put an amendment in and you genuinely want us to be involved, Chair of the Fire Authority sat over there. The budget process at the Fire Authority has involved all the groups. I don't agree with part of what's going to happen when we approve it, but all credit to Councillor Hughes, we've worked together. For weeks we've worked together and we've had briefings, we've been involved, we've had our say. That hasn't happened here. We've had a week of a pack. If I, as an accountant, had gone to the management team with a pack like that and said, in a week we're going to put this in, they'd have laughed. Honest to God, they would have laughed, because it would never happen in industry. So, come on, if you genuinely want us involved, if you genuinely want to know what we would do, and genuinely are interested in ideas that could help people in Kirklees across all the wards, then involve us next time, because we may have something that's helpful that could add something to the budget process other than an argument in the council chamber, because we've achieved so little tonight. Your budget, it will go through. You've got a majority. We're under no illusions about that. But what we don't know is if your offer of us working with you would be genuine if you made it, so approve it. Councillor Pandor, you're not looking at me. Are you going to offer us that next time? Come October, will you come to us with a budget pack and say to us, let's work together. Let's see what we, as the 69 elected members of Kirklees, can do for the people of Kirklees together.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. Councillor Sims, please.
I didn't press that button, Madam Mayor, but I can speak. Look where it's come from. All today, I've been listening. You've been hammering Conservatives, and you know, I've got to tell you that history in Kirklees is that when Conservatives ran this council, we became a 5-star council. Never been achieved before. So these Conservatives that you're all jumping up and down and booing and what have you, Councillor Hill, managed to run this council and achieve 5 stars. I told you, no. I think you failed to hear. I said there were 3 years. There was 3 years when they didn't, Councillor Hill. So you didn't listen properly, did you? What? I mean, you've been stood up today about children's services. You know, you had plenty of money in 2014, but you failed. You failed to run children's services properly. You failed. So it isn't all about money.
It was a Conservative
it's how you run it. I know you don't like it, David, but it's the truth. Over the years, you've had huge amounts of money. You're awash with money. But you still hadn't enough, David, had you? You'd never enough. And we managed, during that time, to give a rebate to pensioners. And at that time, you opposed it. You didn't want, and you were supposed to be people that were caring for people. I've heard in this council you've been caring for people for a long time, but it doesn't seem to be getting anywhere. And we all know, if you speak truthfully, money was short. It was short after the Labour government came out of power. They've done it 3 times while I've been living, bankrupt the country, right? So we had no money. Even industry out there, we had no money. But we had to make do. We had to continue to make widgets and cars. This council could do the same thing. And how can you talk about investment when the leaders of this council are moaning all the time about Kirklees? You know, they don't say, come along here, come to a great place, invest with us. No, they're moaning all the time. So anybody from private sector is not going to come in here if the people that run it can't back it up. And that's where we are. And you did say you wanted to talk to us. Liz is quite right. But you didn't. You were so cocky, but you've got it. You've got your budget. We'll see how it goes. We'll see how these town centres perform, because half of the things you're talking about was put in by the Conservative-run council, right? You've picked them up, you've run with them, right, but you've not completed them. And I can name them if you want, they're there, and you know what they are, right? So we've had all them years where you've been temporarily picking them up, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and you've not done it. And today, there's no meat on the bones again. Pie in the sky. We're going to do this, X millions, right? And I agree that that's what you want to do, but again, there's nothing there. And I can see us this time next year being in the same position. Just the same. Last year you said the same thing. And how far on are we? Not so far. You know, we're still at square one. So, you know, let's tell the people out there, we as councillors, all of us, we look after us patch, we work for it, I do anyway, we work and we try and get the best. I try and get the most out of this council of my area as I can, and I try to get the most out of any government for Kirklees. That's my policy. I've always done it, and that's where I stand. And that's where a lot of you lot should stand as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sims. Councillor Hill, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I had actually pressed the button by accident, but given what Councillor Sims has just said, I think I will respond. I think it's a shame, Ken, that you've brought up the issue of children's services, because one thing that I would always say, and I said it to him personally, and I will say it publicly in this chamber, that one person who consistently, when I was in charge of Council of Children's Services, gave me constructive criticism, good advice and a listening ear was Robert Light. And I really valued that cross-party relationship, and I think that worked really constructively. So I do think it's a shame that you've dragged what I think was essentially an issue that we had cross-council agreement on largely. Obviously, I have been absent for some of the last couple of years. But I think certainly during my time in that cabinet post, we had a really constructive discussion multiple times in this chamber. And as I say, one person whose opinion and advice I always valued was former councillor Robert Light. And as I say, I've said that to him, and I'll say it publicly now. And I think that I never, even though I potentially could have, sought to blame either the Conservative government or this council's Conservative groups, current or past, for any of what went on in children's services. So I think it's a shame that you have somewhat ham-fistedly attempted to tonight. I think the second point that I wanted to make was just to come back on something that I think a couple of the Conservative councillors have said tonight about we're dragging politics into this. Now, actually, I'm a politician, you know, and I'd hope, actually, that there's a few of you on all sides of this chamber that will agree with this. Of course I'm dragging politics into this, because I believe, and that's why I'm standing here on, you know, a cold Wednesday night in February, when, you know, I could be doing a whole range of other things. I'm here because I believe that politics solves problems. It might cause them, but it can also solve them. And I actually think that the history of Kirklees, if you want to look at it as a council and as an area, shows where politics has solved problems. It's activists in Kirklees who made the political strides forward that allow me as a woman to stand here in this chamber tonight. It was, you know, politicians of all colours, actually, who have made the strides forward in this country that enable us all to live the lives that we do. And so I am never, ever ashamed of bringing politics into any discussion, because politics governs absolutely every aspect of all our lives. And I think to suggest otherwise and to criticise those who make discussions political is deeply disingenuous, because we have to. Because the budget of a local authority is one of the most political issues there is, that affects the lives of every single resident in this borough. Whether you think our Labour budget tonight is fantastic, whether you support one of the amendments, whether you couldn't be bothered to put in an amendment of your own, whatever, I don't think anybody can reasonably argue that this is not a political discussion, and I actually don't think that that's cause for shame or argument. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Councillor Watson, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, the first thing I'd like to do is I'd like to apologise. I'd like to apologise to anybody on the webcast who tuned in tonight thinking they were going to see a detailed and informed debate on the proposals that are being put forward for the budget for Kirklees Council for the next 12 months. In fact, anybody who's tuning in who wanted to see a spectacle of various people from various different parties taking pot shots at the Conservative Party will be delighted. Now, actually, I don't have a problem with that, big enough and tough enough to take that. Whether it's criticising us about amendments, whether it's, yeah, we get it, OK, you're a bit hacked off, that government's not throwing money at local councils, we get that. We can't actually directly influence that here, and the more times you say it, it doesn't change anything. OK, we get that message. So if everybody feels better, that's good. OK, I'm hopeful that everybody feels better for venting their spleen and so forth, but I don't think it's very constructive. The one thing I would say that, I think Councillor Mather nailed it tonight, actually. And this is on the point about the budget amendment. And I'll just quote exactly what Councillor Mather said. She said that Basically, if you put in a budget amendment, you agree with the remainder of the budget, apart from those bits that you amend. And she actually said tonight that what there has been is tinkering around the edges with amendments. And you're absolutely right, Councillor Mather. You're absolutely spot on. What we have seen tonight is tinkering around the edges. No fundamental analysis, no detailed review of the proposals for running this council for the next 12 months. So, as I say, anybody who tuned in who was hoping to see that will have been sadly disappointed. Now, really, I could be cynical and say that that's just diversion tactics. That's really trying to keep the attention away from the detail of the budget. But that would imply a degree of strategic thinking and analysis, which I don't see a lot of in this council, I have to say. There was another quote that I picked up coming from the benches opposite, which was that this is a radical, local, wealth-building agenda. And then I think the comment went on to say that I was going to be delivered through co-ops and mutuals and so forth. I don't have a problem with a radical, local, wealth-building agenda, but this is not it. But that is what we need. What we need in Kirklees is we need some ambition, we need some vision, we need some leadership. And that's what's lacking here. What we need is digitally connected, mixed-use environments where people can work, rest and play, where people can live their whole lives, where people can enjoy their environment, where they can be well off and they can prosper. And what that needs is vision and leadership. And that is what is lacking. That's what's absolutely lacking. We have spent a whole evening here with people venting their spleen, slagging off the Tories, talking about cuts and things like that, but not actually looking at the detail of what could be done for this borough. Now, the council leader and I are going to the south of France in a couple of weeks' time. Aren't we, Shabir? We're going to spend a little time together in the south of France. We went last year, didn't we? I've got the pictures. The point that I make is we're going to an international property conference. There's going to be money, there's going to be champagne, it's going to be fantastic. Money will be no object. There will be companies, developers, organisations from all over the world, cities, city regions, all promoting their wares, all trying to tell people that they should go to their city region, their part of the world, and they should invest, they should bring private sector capital to invest and create places and to create environments that are fantastic for people to work, rest and play in. And we'll go there. And the council leader will be promoting Kirklees. And it'd be really interesting to see what the pitch is. Because if I look through this budget tonight, the one thing that I will take with me, the one lasting memory that I will take to the south of France, where all these countries, all these cities will be selling their wares, selling their proposals, will be that we're going to put £2 extra per car on car boots to save the markets. That's us. That's Kirklees. Let's be realistic about this. That's the kind of things that this visionary budget is proposing to sort out the problems in Kirklees. And that is the fundamental problem. Lack of vision, lack of leadership, lack of ambition, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Walker, please.
Right. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So far, I've tried to avoid standing up and talking about trees, partly because I have no further wish to cement my reputation as a bearded tree hugger, but also because I do believe that, being serious, this budget debate should be about the priorities, which is about a budget to safeguard the most vulnerable people in Kirklees, to give our children the best possible start, to boost the health of the most disadvantaged in our society, and yes, to develop a strong economy that can provide better living standards for the people who live here. And I do think that is being delivered through this budget. However, I do want to talk about trees, just really to clarify some of the things that have been mentioned earlier. I really welcome the inclusion of the White Rose Forest in the amendments that have been tabled by the Liberals and by the Green Party. Just want to point out that quite a few of the things that are in the proposals, and more detailed thing from Andrew from the Green Party, quite a lot of those things are happening already as part of the White Rose Forest strategy. So, sorry? Right, we'll just go through that. So part of it, a lot of the things about Green Street, that work is included in the work that I think is envisaged going forward in terms of improving things like the Leeds Road corridor. More can be done. I don't think we disagree on that, but a start has been made. On the other side, I can speak with more authority because a lot of it refers to the WHO is the Home and Comb NFM Operations Group. I'm actually chair of that group, so I've been involved for the last 2 or 3 years with a whole range of partners looking at developing this project. And yeah, some of that extra funding would be fantastic. Some of this work has already started. So, for example, work up in the Combe Valley with landowners to develop schemes for tree planting. Actually, a lot more than £10,000 has already gone into that. There was £10,000 to start it off that went in from the Environment Agency, followed up by a lot of money that's really gone on in kind from the Woodland Trust. And just linking in with the comments from Councillor Taylor, really agree with you that a lot of funding for these things can be obtained from the Woodland Trust, which is exactly why we've done that. So a lot of the money that's going in there, as you rightly say in your comments there, that money will actually be coming into Kirklees. So just for the first phase of the work that's happening, we've got a third share of £1.3 million, which came from Wicker, from the Combined Authority for Natural Flood Management. We've also got a very considerable sum of money coming in from the Woodland Trust with work that is going to go alongside the moorland restoration and creation of things like leaky dams. So this kind of thing is happening. We are bringing in money from outside, and it brings lots of benefits. Health benefits, environmental benefits, potentially economic benefits, because it's going to create much more attractive countryside. And one of my great desires in the longer term is to encourage more people to get out into that fantastic countryside, both our local residents and people from beyond our borders as well. I would hope everybody would support that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Bolt, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And firstly, could I please place on record that, contrary to some comments, I had a very interesting and fruitful discussion, a very enlightening discussion with Councillor Cooper recently. We talked about the environment. We talked about transport. We talked about electrical vehicles making a big impression on the area. But sadly, it wasn't Andrew. It was his brother Richard, who was the leader of Harrogate Borough Council, where they're doing all those things. But with regards to the old days, Andrew, yeah, Huey, Dewey and Louis are still doing quite well over there at putting together their wish list for Christmas, aren't they? The leader started off today in his speech by promising new, innovative ways of working. He's nodding his head. I didn't know there was any option other than to have a new and innovative way of working. I didn't know you could have an old one, Shabir. But one of the new, innovative ways of working in this chamber, which he may not be aware of the impact, is the exclusion of the press. One of the first signs of any totalitarian regime is when you exclude the press from doing their job. If you care to read, exclusion doesn't mean removing totally, hampering their business. We are being told constantly how hard it is for the members of the press to hear what goes on here and also to see what goes on here. So perhaps you'll consider that, Councillor Pandor. Having seen their brave new world last week for the new, innovative ways of working, we had a drop-in session for the Dewsbury Riverside, the flagship development for Kirklees. On that, there was no infrastructure promised. There was no innovative transport measures. There was, and he's not here. Thanks, Peter. There was no sign of the much-vaunted new Ravensthorpe railway station on the master plan that the public are being shown about the Dewsbury Riverside. Ravensthorpe railway station is still where it's always been. Yet it's been in the media that this is new, innovative Labour. This is the way we're going. Councillor McBride said earlier on he was greening Kirklees. You've cursed it. But so far, every time this has been brought up, and we've had lots of reference to trees, you've failed to evidence that with any statistical or empirical evidence. No air quality assessments, no environmental impact reports, which I would remind Councillor, as a result of the climate emergency, and now a policy of this Council. So when we start bringing forward consultation on the Cooper Bridge Relief Road, that should have air quality and environmental impact assessment. So it hasn't. Sorry, Madam Mayor, if you just tell him stop chuntering for a minute and he'll listen. It had no evidence. There was no data about how it's going to affect traffic journeys. There's no data about how felling trees on the historical Kirklees estate is going to affect air quality, how it's going to affect congestion. That all comes later when they've chosen the option. There was no evidence about where the linking with our neighbours in Calderdale is, who it turns out are building massive housing and industrial estates just at the other side of the motorway. But he ridicules his Labour colleagues when they offer alternatives, including Councillor Firth, who is sitting there, when his Labour colleagues are putting options such as the living wall along the Halifax Road going in from Huddersfield to Halifax. When people say, how about a green wall? We're greening it, we're greening it. There is no evidence of how you planting a few saplings on a roundabout is making any evidence. Councillor Murgatroyd, again earlier on, if people can remember that far back, said he's dealing with austerity. But what about the cause of austerity? Who sold the gold reserves? Who left the Treasury with a memo for the future saying, sorry, there's no money? If you're going to be tough on austerity, Councillor Murgatroyd, you need to be tough on the causes of austerity, and that was your colleagues. Yes, they are, David, I agree, they were. I think he said bankers, but it may have been mistaken, hadn't I?
30 seconds, Councillor.
Thank you. So let's see some innovation. We've had a request for working together. That works well on many spheres, and that's why we've got experience of bringing benefits to transport, because when we work together, we can get ministers to improve railway stations in Kirklees. We can get people to come, as Richard George, the Minister spokesman on rail, is coming next week to deliver the much-promised interview with rail users. That's what happens when you work together. When you work in isolation, Shabir, all you hear is your own voice.
Thank you. Councillor Scott, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just rising really to make some comments. Whilst I'm supporting our Labour budget, I just want to pick up some of the things that the Conservative Party have said today. And we talked about austerity. Now it hurts, really hurts. And I've listened to you tonight talking about fly tipping and vision. Well, we've got a vision, and vision costs money, which your government hasn't given us. So what is austerity to me and the people of Kirklees and this borough? It's increased food banks. That's what we've got. We've got mental health waiting lists, suicides on the up, and we've also got bereavement poverty. And let me tell you, Councillor Holmes, when you talk about taking the politics out, in my ward, I've had 2 bereavements with families on the poverty line that cannot afford to bury their parents. That's tragic in this day and age. So when I look towards this Labour budget, I think, yes, this administration is trying to create stability in this council. We're plugging the gaps from what your government has took away from us, and it's about transitional arrangements. We're trying the best we can to make us sustainable. Sustainability costs money. It's not cutting your cloth accordingly. We've got rags that you've left us with. So it's going to cost us to deliver. And I'd like you to look at the budget. You were invited to things. You don't even turn up at cabinet meetings. Well, some of you, a couple have turned up occasionally. And can I just commend you for putting some kind of amendment in? But you've done nothing this year, nothing at all. Shame on you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Councillor Kendrick, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think Councillor Hill addressed the issue about children's services very well, and it's one of the reasons I pressed the button. But I just really want to reinforce that the failure of our children's services, that widespread and systemic failure, didn't happen overnight. It happened over a lot of years. And it's really sad when we find it and we're doing something about it. And I have to say, there are people from all parties in this chamber who have joined in that work to get it right, and we are getting it right, both through corporate parenting and children's scrutiny panel. And I really want you to recognise that and don't start labelling it as one party's fault. As for the amendments, I cannot believe that councillors in this chamber live in a vacuum. They live in a vacuum until October and they go, where are the budget papers? They have no ideas until that point. I have sympathy with what Councillor Holmes said. I understand exactly where she's coming from. But, you know, funny enough, I'm not hard to talk to. I can be a miserable old woman a lot of the time, but I'm not difficult to talk to. And people like Councillor Cooper talk to me about furniture and appliances and white goods. And funnily enough, there's a date in our diaries, I can't remember, next week or the week after, where we're going to sit down and look at what we can do. And anybody from any party would be welcome at that if you really care about people in Kirklees. I care about all tenants in need. I particularly care for the poor souls on universal credit who try and furnish a home. I'm particularly anxious and worried about our care leavers who do get an allowance to help furnish a home, but nowadays it's not really as much as it should be. And we do waste a lot in terms of white goods that could be tested and reused by other people and furniture, and we really need to help those who are in great need. As for our budget, I'm absolutely thrilled that we're investing in additional special educational school places. I think that's an absolute triumph. I'm absolutely find it fantastic that we're going to build some residential care homes that are absolutely suitable for our children in care. I'm absolutely amazed and delighted that we're investing more in mental health services and particularly dementia care. And as for Peter McBride, known as Johnny Appleseed, apparently, who was going to plant trees, I had a conversation with him the other day and we sat down and said, so how many trees is this in this budget? And we started counting it up. And without the greening of the roads, and it does affect all the major roads, we got to 54,000 trees are in this budget. And we gave up then because I got bored. I have to say, I'm proud that we are looking at early support for families, for children, so that they don't end up coming into care. I'm proud that we've invested in family group conferencing, sitting down and working with families how to get over difficulties so that children don't have to be taken away from their families, which is the worst decision this council makes as well as the best decision. I'm pleased and delighted that we've invested in what's called multi-systemic therapy, and that's really working with families with children 11 to 17 who are just on the edge of the youth justice system to stop that tipping over, to stop those children being brought into care. There are many, many things in this budget I could celebrate. I'm sure you're all tired. I'll stop now and not bore you any further.
Thank you, Councillor Kendrick. So we've had a proposer and a seconder to move to the vote. Can we now take a vote on if we should move to the vote? All those in favour? All those against? That is carried. So we're now going to move to the vote. So using your consoles, please can you vote upon the Green amendment? Members, I am now closing the vote. Just for the record, Councillor Uppal's button is not working, so Councillor Uppal has voted against. So that amendment is not carried. So therefore, we will now move on to the next amendment. So using your consoles, please vote upon the Liberal Democrat amendment. Thank you again. I'm closing the vote, and just for the record, Councillor Uppal's button is not working, and Councillor Uppal has voted against. So that amendment has not been carried. So as no amendments have been carried, just before we move to the vote on the original budget motion, I'm going to ask Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, I won't be long, but there's 1 or 2 points I want to make. Firstly, I made a note all my members were talking on the budget.
Yes, but you...
I was led to believe that we've just taken a vote on moving to the vote, which means that the debate is finished.
No. 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 To clarify, yeah.
Council procedure rules allow the mover of the motion, if an amendment hasn't been approved, a right of reply before we go to the vote.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Like I was saying, all my members who have spoken tonight, and a lot of other members have actually spoken on the budget, and it's sad that the debate started with a wasted decade. And my colleague, Councillor Cassie Scott, hit the nail on the head. The decade has been lost, Madam Mayor. We've got food banks, we've got rough sleepers, we've got homelessness that's trebled, we've got NHS waiting times, we've got NHS in meltdown, and we've got a crisis within the NHS that's actually creating such a big vacuum that nobody wants to go and work there. We've not got the workforce that's actually creating an environment where we can actually look after our elderly people. We're waiting for adult social care green paper. The Tories said that they will balance the books within one parliament. We're still waiting. The latest projections are that by the end of 2020, there will be a £50 billion year-on-year deficit nationally. That is what's letting us down. Madam Mayor, I am... heard that there is no leadership. Well, the only leadership I find lacking is from the Tories, that they couldn't even put pen to paper and bring an amendment. Madam Mayor, my list is massive, but one critical issue that will have a big impact on this council is universal credit. This was the flagship of the Tory government, and it's going to create so much devastation that we have to create a vision that will make sure that our communities are bound together. And I can give you one commitment, Madam Mayor. Although we didn't vote for the Lib Dem and the Green amendment, I will give a personal undertaking that I will look at it line by line and I will see what I can do. One quick example, Madam Mayor, about cross-party working. Just last council meeting, the leader of the opposition said, we don't want to work on a cross-party basis on the biggest challenges the nation and the globe is facing, climate change. I rest my case, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Pando. So, using your consoles, we are now going to move to the vote. Members, can I just have a bit of hush, please? The budget motion has been carried. I will now close the meeting. Thank you.